All right, welcome back everybody. It's another episode of the TED Talk. We're back from the interviews into something a little bit more interesting. We're back with another show where we're going to be talking about some of the pretty interesting transfers that have been happening so far this summer. Well, I guess answer the question whether it was as interesting of a transfer window as we all expected. And again, I will be joined by the man himself, by Thorin. So I hope you're ready for some more TNT action. See what I did there? That was
Okay.
that's a joke I've been thinking about for a while. I'm not
Okay.
sure if it's that funny, but yeah, Duncan, thank you for joining me. How have you been doing?
The only thing is, technically, if you're going to use TED Talk, which by the way is a really clever name because obviously in your case since TED has 2 Ds,
Yeah,
if someone even Googles that, hopefully it'll still find it.
yeah,
Really, shouldn't you just follow through and then say, like, welcome to my TED Talk or welcome to my talk as the beginning intro? That should be the leading line, surely, to like get the
yeah.
branding on point.
I think wait to reach maybe when I reach tier 1, right? Because
Okay.
obviously on TED Talk they are inviting people that have achieved something in their life. So
Right.
I'm still waiting to reach that level,
Okay.
and then I'm gonna be like, welcome to my TED Talk. Then I can actually say to people,
Okay.
I can sell the point that I can actually teach them something, you know.
Fair enough.
But yeah, we're here to talk about transfers. We're here to talk about all the moves that have happened in the last couple of months, and obviously
Well, I've
we're
got a question for you at the beginning. You
all
you
right.
hinted at it there. Like beyond, I know like Richard, for example, had this tick. It's
Sure.
one of those ones I find a bit puzzling. Because when everyone does this thing where they're sort of like, was it really a roster mania?
Yeah.
I'm like, loads of the top 10 teams like changed team players,
Yeah.
mate. I think what they really mean by that is like people thought, for example, like Simple would be on a team. Well, obviously, he has such
Yeah.
an enormous name that would overshadow the whole
Mm.
offseason. But I actually think there was a lot of movement, mate. Like, I would go the other way and say, think how rarely actually you have a major end and then like loads of teams that could have won the major change of player. Like, normally people stick with the same roster when they're really good. So I'm kind of praised with it. It wasn't the craziest roster mania ever, but I thought it
Mm.
was a pretty active one. Like, think you had like NaVi, Spirit, Falcon, loads of teams. I thought it was quite a lot of roster movement.
I agree. I agree. When I was making the list of the transfers that we were going to be discussing today, there was a lot of ones that I had to actually cut off, and I was like, who am I to decide which one is significant and which one isn't, right? Because there's so many things that happen. I think Richard, you mentioned, he did a video on that as well, and his video was like 3 hours and a half or something like that because he tried to go through everything. So yeah, it's been crazy. I think the reason
Which it
maybe
sounds a bit weird, like not much of a roster mania.
right.
3.5 hours later. Like, how long did it take you to do the video then?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever.
Uh,
We can all have our
I
own
think
take.
I will ask you a question about that though, because I think as much as it was incredibly eventful, I think the reason for a lot of people that this didn't end up staying like a crazy roster mania is the fact that it probably wouldn't change too much in the ecosystem in terms of people being competitive to Vitality. I feel like that was maybe I guess the goal for a lot of people to see teams make a lot of changes so they can compete with Vitality. Do you think that someone did that?
I think that's the other thing I don't get. I actually think successfully didn't Spirit and Falcons both make like a power move to potentially contend
Sure.
immediately with Vitality. As far as I can tell, the only people who didn't, by the way, is like Mouse, but they already have their
Mm,
roster set. And also, here's another reason why it doesn't quite work for me. The idea to whack roster
sure.
mania. The Monacy one in a real sane world would have happened now, but they just have so much money in Falcons. They made it happen like 2.5 months ago or whatever. Like, that doesn't even make sense. And that was midway
Yeah.
through the split, mate. It's kind of nuts, isn't it? So I don't know, mate. And to me,
I
I
guess
think
Shui to Liquid
it's a
as
legit
well.
one.
Shui
Yeah,
to
there's
Liquid as
another
well.
one. Some
Yeah.
of these were like panic moves before. By the way, I
Yeah.
also do think that's probably the part people are missing. Is that like pretty sweet. Here's the part. If you want to reframe it, it's not that it wasn't a crazy roster mania or teams that were top teams didn't
Mm,
make moves. The real issue here, I think, is this: the names coming up aren't giant names because I actually think that era of CS unfortunately has gone. The idea that if you're a top 10 team, you only recruit another, like, world class player
mm.
that's been playing you in, quarters and semis and big top. No, in the modern day, even the top teams, as you can see now, scout the academy product, etc. And if anything, isn't the new meta sort of trying to get like the joke is like with Kids, you're trying to get the next donk before the donk. That's the real new move, or the next Monacy before he's Monacy. You don't wait till he's Monacy because as seen by the Falcons move, then it costs more money than God has. So like, I actually think it's more that like we just moved out of the old method of signing players.
Right.
I think in some ways in CS now we're in the era of what they started to do in like the 2000s, where it was all about like you don't like sign the player when he already plays for like PSV. You go to like South America and find him when he's 14 years old and
Mm.
sign him to your academy squad. That's what it feels like CS is now.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like we're recycling people as much anymore, which is a good thing in my opinion. It definitely makes the scene a little bit more exciting. So I suggest we get into it. So the way we're gonna do this, because we are quite basic on this show, we're gonna do a tier list, something that no one has ever done in the history of humankind. And the way we're going to do this, so we have 5 tiers. I decided to go with a numeric system. So we've got the 10 out of 10, which means it's a perfect transfer. We think that they couldn't have done anything better, or even if they could, well, the certain team, they probably did the right thing by picking those players or making those changes. Then we've got the 7, 8, and 9 out of 10, which is pretty solid. We like it, but it doesn't mean that they will necessarily start winning events straight away. It could be great for the team, especially if they're a little bit lower of a tier. Then you've got the 5 to 7 out of 10, which is all right, but not overly exciting, but it does make sense and it's a good move. And then we've got the 3 to 5 out of 10, which is, there is a slight chance that it works, but again, it doesn't really tickle our fancy too much. And then we've got the 1 or 2 out of 10, which is what the hell were they thinking, or no one really gives a shit about that roster move. So we're gonna start it off. We're just gonna look at how the teams are selected here and go one by the other. We're gonna start it off with ENCE. When it comes down to ENCE, I guess for a lot of people that have been following tier 2 Counter-Strike, this is not tier 1 anymore, but they did remove zweih from the IGL spot, which I think was a pretty interesting choice. And they added rigoN out of all people, and they moved zweih, somebody young, to the IGL spot. So how are you feeling about this one?
Don't feel this move at all. Like, what's weird about this move is it doesn't even seem really like you specifically wanted rigoN. It seems more like this is a vote of no confidence in zweih as an IGL, and then the rest of the move is like you've got to like obviously rigoN himself's not going to be the IGL, so you take SDY, who's already done the role when sort of forced to. But if people don't know, even in Monty, as far as I can tell, he didn't really want the role. Like, famously, that one major, people think he was doing it. I think he'd already swapped before they even got fully into that major. So as far as I know, I think he only did it when like other people in Monty didn't want to. So for me, that even looks like potentially a temporary move, mate. As in, you do this for now, you see if it works out. But then, for example, you either like bring a different person into the IGL, SDY swap spots, or maybe SDY himself eventually gets bounced. I don't know what the logic of the team is. So the reason I don't buy the move personally, like I don't mind it if you just don't think zweih was the right IGL, is really rigoN in 2025. Like, I didn't mind him being added to like Big Clan because that was like a team that's tried everything. They've tried every possible move you can. So at that point, you just go, fuck it, just, you know, throw the kitchen sink and just do that move as well, because none of their moves work, unfortunately. No matter how the joke with Big Clan is, it doesn't matter how good the player is on paper or how good all the names are on paper, it never somehow works out in the server. So I don't really understand what the premise here for ENCE is. Like, and also, to me, you have to remember, they used to have Kacpersky on their team. Like, he was one of
and
the
now
best
they're playing with myltsi
team.
from ENCE Academy. They lost Kacpersky.
So there's another problem. I also feel like here's the thing. For me, this almost looks like a side grade or even a mild downgrade, because I think if you add all the moves together overall, like, I'm not really feeling it. I don't like this move itself either, because like is SDY a better IGL than zweih? Seems implausible. That's why I said to me, I wonder if this is a stopgap to go to the next move, you know.
Right, that's, for me, the problem right now with ENCE is that I think the narrative has completely shifted with this team from being a potential dark horse for tier 1 events and being a tier 1.5 team that is trying to get bigger names in order to succeed, to a team that is, as you said, they're just looking for the next golden chicken, I guess, if we could say, the next youngster that they could sell for a lot of money, pretty much. I think they did a good job with Kacpersky. I mean, they got him off of the Young Ninjas, and now they sold him back to NIP, and they probably earned a little bit out of that. IGL-wise, I do agree with you, because I feel like SDY was probably one of those guys that has always been quite intelligent in the server, and I'm not disputing that. I think you could be quite good at teaching some of the youngsters the basics. So when you have someone like myltsi making the transition into big tier Counter-Strike, because he spent the last 2 or 3 years on ENCE Academy, had some prior experience with a team called Enterprise before that, but we're not really counting that as proper higher level Counter-Strike experience. I think SDY is a really good player to teach the basics to some of those young guys, right? He can probably strengthen them up. But then in the same time, you're looking at who's going to be the #1 star once again, which was one of the bigger issues of ENCE in their previous iteration, right? Even when they had Kacpersky on, there was still a bit of an argument to be made there. And I think the big reason there is the fact that your best player is actually a role player, and that's Naitu, in my opinion. SDY is not a star guy. He's going to be the perfect fit for potentially your 3rd best player, which I think justifies maybe the fact that you make him an IGL. But do you really feel like Naitu from support positions is going to be able to be the star? Or you're now relying on guys like Pody or, I don't know, myltsi to just come in from ENCE Academy, which was a team that was struggling even in tier 3 Counter-Strike, and be a star on a higher level, which is the reason I'm feeling a little bit iffy about this one. But yeah, rigoN's an interesting topic. Do we really count his time on Big as a failure on his side? Or do we take the angle of this wasn't the right place for him, and maybe he can
I mean,
prove
here's the
people
question,
wrong now.
mate. Where the fuck is the right place? He's been every fucking place at this point in time. At this point, we've got Narnia. Does he need to join a team from Narnia, Ted? Like, he's been everywhere. He was on Bad News Eagles. He's like, here's the thing. He's an all right player, but my problem with a player like him is he isn't a fucking spring chicken, mate. He's been around a million years. Like, people almost want to do that thing when you haven't succeeded. Like, up-and-coming player, like, he's been around for a donkey's years, mate. So that's why I say, for me, it's different if it's a big type move, because Big's whole thing is like, we have to just try anyone who's German or not German at this point in time, or vaguely speaks German. I'm assuming he does because he's Swiss.
Yeah,
so
yeah, he does.
I just don't know for ENCE, because like I say, if anything, I actually thought the tactic they were taking before made more sense. If you think about the last ENCE lineup when they had Kacpersky, that was where you had the two veteran people in your team with real experience was sort of the part of the core and the tactical aspect of the team and the roles, etc. And then it was the young fraggers. I think that model makes a lot of sense. This one's weird because in his own way, rigoN's a veteran at this point in time in CS, but he's just not really like decorated or super experienced. And yeah, like I say, I don't know what the vision of the team is when you do a move like this. Because actually, if you asked a random person out there, especially because a lot of people would only have ever seen this team online at that ELISA tournament, if you asked a random fan what's like the thing you're excited about with ENCE, I think some people would say Glaive is still a massive name. It's still one of the most decorated names of all time. As soon as you take Glaive off the line, don't people just stop caring as much?
Yeah, I feel like it. I mean, I wouldn't say I was even excited about Glaive on the team, to be fair. I think
sure. But you
I
want
think
him to be in the tournaments, in the
yeah, exactly. It makes a lot more sense when you are trying to build a team with younger guys and you bring in Glaive and SDY, as you pointed out, because you can get some of that experience out of them. Night2, I think, is the one player that is keeping that team above water, so to speak, for me. I feel like the moment that a bigger team has the budget or has the space and says, hey, you know what, we're gonna bring that guy over, I think it's done for ENCE the moment they lose him. But yeah, because of the reason that they did lose Kacpersky to a better team, arguably, and they didn't quite bench him or remove him or whatever. How are you feeling about slight chance it works 3 out of 5? Maybe not 1 or 2, because I wouldn't say what the hell are they thinking.
Oh, I don't think it's like the worst move ever. Like, by
Yeah.
the way, I don't think it's like with Glaive, it was amazing either. Like, if anything, sadly, I think people who only saw that Lisa Masters probably have a incredibly rose tinted glasses for what that roster was like. They continued playing for months after that, and they quite frankly just weren't as good. So, no, I think maybe like second to last tier team's fair.
Yeah.
It's not a terrible move, like I say.
Yeah, it could mean that they have a chance to make it to the major, maybe grab one of the last 2 spots in a way. I wouldn't be optimistic, but maybe there is something there. We'll see. Maybe rigoN decides, you know, it's time to have the best time of his career, and SDY turns out to be the best IGL ever. Okay, so we're moving forward. Virtus.pro, this is one that I know you're going to be pretty opinionated on, because you were one of the people that was reminding constantly that Perfecto, of everyone, that Perfecto was a free agent and he was worth given a chance to. How do you feel about VP now?
The problem with this move is it's one of those ones where I'm really shocked that this is just the only move they've done, because when they made that move, Ted, again, I thought, well, that's in no universe a 1-for-1 swap. Like, if you think about who you're changing out there, like, Perfecto is supposed to be like a really good role player who sort of, you know, gives you like, he's supposed to be like the overqualified role player in your team. So instead, when you look at the roster they have now, Flammers for me was supposed to be like your star fucking aggressive rifler. In fact, that's why they signed to this enormous contract. And if you ever saw in his team, the joke is, even though a lot of people noted within VP, they didn't actually, Electronic didn't seem to use him like he was used in GamerLegion, where he did look like he was just like the most abused entry player of all time. Like you get the 30%, you know, usage entry kill attempt. Even though they didn't, he was still far and away by the player taking all the openers on VP. So for me, I just don't get the 1-for-1. Like, what's weird about this move is if you made this move, but it's like it's just the order of the moves came out in the wrong order. You know, we remove this person, we're bringing this guy in, but then we do another move next. Like after this, you know, we take out a different player and then we put in, you know, like some fucking super duper entry player, then it would make sense. So the weirdest thing about the move for me is I like the move. I think Perfecto should be on a team. I think actually you could argue. I mean, the rumor is supposedly maybe last year Spirit was talking to him. I think he could have gone to a better team even, except he's just been sat on the bench, so people have forgotten about him, haven't they? The bigger issue here is I feel like for VP overall, I don't know that it's actually a better move. Like he's a good signing, but I feel like the plus minus is potentially negative for this team. Like we already see, look, as the time of recording right now, they've already underwhelmed in the first tournaments they've even played. Like it's kind of it's not even his fault. He's played all right. Like I just feel like this is one of the biggest mysteries of VP is, tell you what, mate, they've signed a lot of fucking good names the last 2 or 3 years. Just the rosters never worked, do they?
Yeah, I think there's a couple angles onto that Virtus.pro conversation. Angle number one, you already kind of touched upon, is the fact that when you sign Flamus onto this team, alongside IGL obviously, but you can't really change the way that you've used IGL before because he's the OPER, right? And he was playing on the CAS team before that regardless. So he is used to being a little bit more supportive. You sign Flamus out of GamerLegion, the entire precipice, the entire idea, the selling point was we are going to run away from that boring style that Jame had as an in-game leader.
Yeah.
We're going to bring in a sharp element. We're going to give him freedom. We're going to show that Virtus.pro can play exciting as Counter-Strike, right? And then Flamus comes in, and in a matter of 6 months, you change the roles of your least experienced rifle that is supposed to be your star 3 times. You just jiggle him around. You're like, well, you're shit here, go there. You're shit here, go there. You're not really giving him time to adapt, right? And then towards the end of the break, when we forget about that, I mean, it's hilarious. I completely agree with you. It's hilarious that you're I guess benching a player that was supposed to be your star to get a supportive player, and that just tells you that there was something completely fundamentally wrong with the way that Virtus.pro designed their year and the way that they wanted to go about things with that lineup. And then we can't ignore the rumors about Flit and Fame wanting to leave the team and potentially Electronic being benched. Doesn't that feel like you're, one of those videos when you've got a pool in the garden and there's a hole in the pool, and then you just put I guess you just put something on the gap in the pool, and you're like, okay, that's gonna hold on, that's gonna be good, and then it starts leaking from everywhere around it. Doesn't it feel like that? Because if you are Virtus.pro, and everyone was already frustrated, because we could see from some of the clips, obviously we can't use those to determine that they hated each other, right? But that would be too extreme. But there was obviously a little bit of tension. Do we feel like just bringing in Perfecto is going to help everyone else erase the last 6 months of frustration and bad results and everything, and be like, well, we've got a new team, we're going to play the best of Counter-Strike, especially when when the start of the season for you was get grouped in Fisher and get grouped in Cologne as well?
This is where I actually think there are so many things that we use as like shorthand on talk shows and become memes that are actually, because they're all, it's my style if people don't know that, all my jokes start with whatever the analytical point is. Like I'll think about the game and I'll think like, this person didn't play that well. Then I'll spawn a joke from that and then I'll try and build it around that. But the point is there always has to be like a truth from CS in the joke, in my opinion. So similarly, right, that whole meme of like role cells, like the idea that like, oh, you're just bloody obsessed with the idea everyone has roles. Like, bro, the person I really need to know now whether he is a role cell believer or not is Electronic, because when I look at these rosters between the Cloud9 one that had no fucking AWPer and then like some of these rosters just don't make any sense. Like it makes me think, does he himself not subscribe to the idea of roles? Because I will say it is quite common with veteran players. They do believe that shit that I think is absolute nonsense, where they go like, if you're a good player, you can do anything. Which is like, listen, if you want to take that in its most literal, in the short term, yes, maybe if you ask like a veteran player, can you play this spot for a little while? Yeah, I think they could. But the idea here is we're talking about, can you be one of the better players in that role in the world if you want to be in a top team? And in theory, I know sadly now people think of VP as an also ran, but on paper and with some of these names, you should be like right in the top 10 mixing it up. You should be a team that like every time's a playoff threat. Maybe you should even be a team like a Spirit where you could go into semis and you could really challenge the squads. The weirdest thing about this move is, one, I still feel like this would have been the perfect move for Spirit. You just upgrade Magics at that point in time, like someone who's just better than him in every sense, including fragging, and stabilizes your team. Whereas for VP, the sad thing is, I get why if you're Electronic, you want Perfecto. I could almost even imagine like a meme, Ted, him just being in the VP offices, like, get me Perfecto, and then the joke is they give him it, but they cut Flamus. Like, well, that's not the, I didn't mean that way. I meant like, get me him in the roster, because obviously they played together in the past. They were really good in all the squads they've been in my opinion. So I can say it's one of the weirdest times ever, because I like the move, as in I like this player being added to almost any top 10, 15 team. I just think for this team overall, it feels like you've done a negative, because surely this doesn't address the style issues whatsoever. And in fact, if anything, I think they were using Flamus like really abusively, like I say. So I feel like now, like, what T-side are you going to have in this team? It's going to be really hard.
Yeah, you are pretty much, I think, looking at either Electronic starting to be a little bit more aggressive, or maybe Fame, I guess, in a way. It still will be a pretty tough one. But I think with that, where are we thinking about putting Virtus.pro with all of that being said? I think
it's like an ENCE one again, mate. So similar sort of tier, in it.
Yeah,
it's not the last one.
I mean, they did bomb out of their first 2 events. Maybe if they had any success. The last one?
The last tier.
You know what? I actually buy that. I buy that because I think there's no way in 6 months' time this team is the same. There is no way they don't make changes in the next 6 months. I don't think so. I really don't.
But the
So
stupid thing is, by the way, that's how also transfers work. You can only judge them at the time based on who the player was
yeah,
and what the team's added. So, like, the joke of this move is this could end up being a move which, if they make 2 other moves in 4 months, might look genius if they're bringing the right
sure.
players. All of a sudden, you know, be incredible, wouldn't it? Like the joke would be if they'd have in the same offseason when potentially it was available, if they'd have announced like YEKINDAR was joining, maybe that's a fucking baller move. Maybe you've like fixed 2 of the roles at once. Just the problem is they haven't. And again, I don't understand in their vision how this roster, like, to me, this should be a roster that's like, you did this move at the end of the offseason, now you're just waiting a month to do the move. Like, you're going to play a whole season with this roster. If you do, by the way, it's going to be a lot of bad results. You're going to miss a lot of playoffs, it feels like.
Yeah, I think this is the type of team that they probably make the major, right? It's going to be really difficult for them to fall out of the top 32. But that's going to be one of the teams that goes to the major and no one has any expectations if it stays the same. Okay, I think we are leaving VP there. I can buy that. I feel like, especially if you did use the signing of Perfecto as a selling point to make Fame and Flit stay, which would be my educated guess onto what happened. I don't really see a future for this project. So we can move forward. We can go into NIP, which is actually, for the first time in maybe 2 or 3 years, I will say, I am a big fan of what NIP is doing right now. NIP obviously benched Aristos. They did sign Kacpersky. They got him back. Now, you could say that it's a bit of a blunder, the fact that you let him go in the first place, but in the same time, you probably didn't really know that he would turn out to be such a great player, so we can brush that aside. Let's just focus on the end product right now. You've got Snappy as an in-game leader. Obviously, you keep Ujurix, which I think was the right choice. You've got Renko, who's still, in my opinion, one of the most talented opers out there, and it's just about time for him to start playing well. You did get Kacpersky, and you've got Shush, who's still an incredibly, I wouldn't even say underrated role player. He's just as solid as hell. As solid as it gets. So with this NIP lineup, I am actually a big fan, and a big shout out to them. They started the calendar year with no VRS points, and now they've made it to the quote-unquote tier 1 circuit where they get the invites, they play well, and they even made it into the second stage of Cologne, which I think on itself is a big enough achievement for a team that had to play Fragadelphia earlier this year.
Remember, the other problem they had in this team was even when they had that other roster, they couldn't even initially use it at the beginning of last season because they had to play with Jax for like VRS purposes. So it meant that they like delayed the start of the roster, and then the second it did get going, I mean, people will know by now that somehow Snappy's ended up in the same scenario when there is no bloody partner system. You know, when when ENCE was really good, he famously wasn't in the Blast partner system, so everything was a qualifier until qualifier. Sure. He's done the same thing because now he has to play 1 million CCTs in a row basically, and never lose to anyone worse to get in, but somehow he's done it. Fair enough. And then I agree with you. If you actually look at the roster before you were really looking at that roster and being like, I need a lot of things to work out. Like, I need a lot of the boxes to get checked now. The key thing for me here is this. I always thought part of the signing they made that I never really bought was the 2 Portuguese players. Sure. Because here's the thing. The Ujurix guy for me was clearly the best player in Seoul. Like, you ever watch them play, he looked far and away the best player. The Aristose guy was just the one where, again, if someone like put a gun to you and said, pick another player, you'd go, I guess that guy, he looks all right, but he was never that great. He was never some like super duper talent. I doubt many people were like hunting this guy down. So you've tried it out. It didn't really work. You kept the one that makes sense. I agree with you. When you actually just go through the roster, this roster is a sleeper, mate, because you look at it like, first of all, I hope no one's doing that thing right, but what about Snappy on Falcons? Bro, if we use that sort of
what
logic,
about 90% of the guys on Falcons?
Literally, no IGL that you can talk about today would still be an IGL, because every IGL has had a down period or a bad roster. IGL isn't like, the whole point is my calling style has fuck all to do with how good the people shooting the guns are on the server. Like, sometimes it doesn't work. So actually, if anything, I think IGLs are the ones you will always see people reclaim and take a gamble on again, like the LXCBs, like Glaive himself. Like, people will always be willing to throw one last lifeline to an IGL, because it's actually one of the only roles where they might have looked bad with the wrong roster, and you put them on the right roster, they can just look 5 times better. It's ridiculous. So I think this was even a great project to try him out on, because the pressure's not enormous at the beginning, and you've got all these younger players. Remember, one thing about Snappy's career that he would tell you himself is, if you look at his career, he's had a lot of players he's played with that have since become stars or became stars with him. None of them were star players before they came to him, or if they were star players before, they were actually watched by the time they got to him. Some of the old Danish players, etc. So I think this is exactly exactly the type of project that Snappy excels with, where people are going to listen to him and he's going to get to be the proper person who controls the squad. And you look at the team, like, I actually think Wrinkles are fucking, that might be one of the smartest moves Nip made in years, mate, because I've heard almost immediately that they signed him. Loads of other people, even including in the CIS region, were sort of like, hey, actually, can we have him? And they're like, well, no, we've signed him now. Like, again, enormous buyout if you want him. So I actually think by now, mate, he could have been in a lot of big teams. I think the Snappy one itself ends up being like a really smart sort of recycle. The Shush move is just baller. Like, people, that one went under the radar because they didn't play Lance, sadly. Like, everyone liked every team this guy's been in for like 3 years, mate. It's just a good team. Like, he just does his job. And then the Kacpersky one is genius because, again, if we're looking basically for another talented rifle player, well, the joke is he was on the NIP Academy. This guy actually, from what I've seen, looks like he has real fucking talent. Again, you watch the crosshair, there's clearly something going on there. So I love the idea you put someone like that with Snappy. Like, I think he is someone who's going to bring the best out of him. So I think this is like a sleeper roster. I think if this team does its job, it should be sort of like right on the border of being a team that can be in playoffs at the lands, as maybe we're going to see now at Cologne, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you look at the history. I mean, a lot of people forget that, but guys like Spings, guys like Nerds, guys like Madden, guys like Senpais, they became players under Snappy, right? So I guess he's that type of a guy that you just send a couple youngsters with big potential to, and he can make them world-class players and big stars. So I'm not sure how you feel about this one. I think they deserve to be put in pretty solid.
I think it's mega, Look, here's the thing. It can't be the top tier one.
No, because they're not going to win trophies, right?
Yeah, and also these players, it's not like Kacpersky like already a HLTV top 20 player and you did a great deal inside him and all. Like, so there's still some potential aspect to go wrong. But on paper, I think this all looks great, mate. And I would have said that even before Cologne began, not just because they've won these games now.
Yeah. Also, Exist is still the coach, which we got to put into consideration. He's a damn good coach and he knows his stuff. Okay, so moving forward, then we have FlyQuest. We're not going to spend too much time talking about this one because it was obviously just one change. But is JKS back playing with Australian teams for the first time since, I think, 100 Thieves? Before that, Renegades, obviously. I think he left before they went over to Extremum. He went over to Complexity. So, yeah, minus Lias, again, one of his ex-teammates from Renegades, plus JKS. You still have Regali, who's been playing quite well. FlyQuest, unfortunately, couldn't make it out of the group stage of Cologne. The moment that we're recording this a couple hours ago, they lost to Liquid in a pretty tight game in the 2-1 fashion. But still, how are you feeling about this one? Because I think, in my book, this is a great move for FlyQuest, and I really see them excelling on the back of it.
I think this is a slam dunk. Like, I'll tell you right now, first of all, back when the team was potentially going to get picked up by either FlyQuest or like some other org that was thinking of picking them up, I know that at the time already, part of the plan of some of the other orgs that wanted to potentially get them was to package JKS in along with them, because obviously he's the most famous Australian player. So in my opinion, it's not only a slam dunk for FlyQuest. I think you could even argue, if it wasn't for JKS's age and the fact that he has some weird, like, sort of rep that follows him. Not that he's like a difficult teammate, that he's just sort of a bit strange or something. He almost has the Oscar fucking thing for him at this point in time, where no one hates him, but there's just some weird thing where, like, people just won't really tell you what bothers them about him. He has some sort of weird reason he gets pushed out of all these squads. I think basically, like, I think JKS could even still be on a better team. So I think actually, bear in mind, I think it's maybe some sort of political or social reason he isn't on a bigger team. I think it's pretty much best move for all parties concerned at this point in time. And even the Liaz removal part, if you remember, even when they were Renegades 6 years ago and they were like a good team, I always thought he was a player that was actually quite confusing because he wasn't some like super talented player to me. If you ever watch his stats, wouldn't even be good. He would just sort of like do a good round in the game, if you know what I mean. He would make like good plays. That was a long time ago now. And I think people like him have sort of lived off the fact that, like, hey, I used to be the guy in Renegade. Like, that's like over half a decade ago now, mate. Like, that doesn't last till today unless you're really good. And I'm sorry, I think also in CS2, you need to be better at fragging people. So I thought he wasn't that good in CS2, quite frankly. Every time I saw FlyQuest played, he wasn't one of the ones I looked at like, there's some real potential there. He was one that I looked at like, you're keeping him in the same way you had Hazard forever, mate. You know, you keep the players that are the old players around. So I think this is a good move all around, mate. I actually think it does raise the level for FlyQuest. It's a floor raiser move, you know.
Okay, we're putting that in pretty solid as well, because I think it does. Good, it does make a lot of sense for them, and it will.
Remember, there's no player of JKS's level, unfortunately, that wants to join FlyQuest. That's the other issue. It's also not as easy to get players in your team. So I think considering what they're working with, it's about as good as you can do a move. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're putting FlyQuest in pretty solid. Then we get into the
And by the way, it
needy.
surely has crazy
Sure.
cultural impact too if you're an Australian
Oh
fan. It's
no,
like your
no,
dream
yeah,
move.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely motivated to everyone else on the team.
Yeah.
Also, if you are in your IGL-ing, you're not necessarily bringing in a massive voice inside of the server, but if you have any questions or if you are, I guess, looking for some solutions or whatever outside of the server, or when you're doing theory or whatever, JKS is definitely bringing in a lot of input from his international tenures on teams like Liquid and Complexity. So yeah, a slam dunk for me as well. Also, I think it will help rigoN in a way because you have a really reliable guy that could be a supportive player in JKS as well, and that usually works out well for Opers. Okay, so now we're moving to the big money one. We're moving to the Falcons and the fact that they decided to bring in kyousuke. Now, again, this is, at this point, a little bit of an older one. A lot has been said on the topic, and a lot of people have discussed this one. I feel like for me, and the way that I want to navigate this conversation is why I think this transfer is actually a great one for Falcons is because you're bringing in a young Russian prodigy that dominated Academy Counter-Strike into a team with nico, hoping that he would become the next superstar of the world. Sounds familiar?
Look, he's probably not going to be donk. It's because, in theory,
Sure.
I should have said that about donk when he came in. No one should actually be donk, including donk. But I agree. If you ever look at the trajectory, it's very similar to when donk was added to Spirit. Because on the one hand, you want to tell people, look, don't really expect the guy to be the best player in the world. I mean, he's probably the one outlier ever that did it. But clearly, there's incredible talent here. Like, again, this is one of these players where I myself, like, and ahed a bit about it. But what happened is when they made the move, I went and just watched a load of POVs. And I was like, I get it. Like, actually, again, if you were going to pick a player who hasn't played like a big tier 1 LAN with real teams, and you had to just go off like what your eye test tells you, I have seen very few eye tests as good as this player, mate. He looks really, really fucking strong. And even though, like, the one part that in theory is the negative is the notion of, like, was it the right player that you removed? But I even think that actually spawns its own interesting discussion, Ted, because obviously, if you're the role cell, you remove Tesses for this guy, don't you? You remove Magisk.
Yeah.
But I actually do think that there's a couple of angles here. One, CS2, I think we actually are learning that you have to throw away some of the guidelines of how we built teams in CSGO. Like, if anything, I would argue the real complaint you should have about 2024 Falcons is that they did follow the CSGO roster building model where it's like everyone in theory fit the roles. You didn't have enough firepower, though. CS2 seems a lot more about firepower. So the interesting part for me, though, is Zonic isn't really known as the guy who develops talent. So I do think he's got his work cut out from there. But I look at this roster and I just think it reminds me of when you make a super team. Because the problem with super teams always is, like, yeah, but what if, like, they all can't play at the level the name says they can? You know, like, will someone miss out? If that happens again, I could see someone struggling. Maybe it's Tessus, maybe it's kyousuke himself, right? But there's a world where if you can make all these players work, you could literally be number one. You could literally be the team that dethrones Vitality. So, I don't know if it could be the top tier for this one because it's still an unproven player, especially at tier 1 in the big lands where they're going to immediately be thrust into. But it's about as good. It's about as hype and exciting and potentially game-changing a move as you can make, I think.
I think if we look at the logic, as you pointed out, Zonic's never been the coach that you're going to give a young guy that's unproven and he's going to make the best player in the world out of him, right? He's been, throughout the years, obviously, if you want to go back to early CSGO days or even 1.6, he probably was that type of a person for some of them. But nowadays, you give him complete players and he makes them work. The thing is, the reason I wanted to draw that parallel with the young Russian guy, I'm actually referring to myltsi a lot more because I feel like it was a really similar case. Maybe with myltsi it was a little bit more of a, I'm not sure if we can say a sure thing, but a lot of people tend to pretend that a couple years ago, no one was disputing the fact that, no one argued the fact that myltsi could actually fail on G2, right? And there was a lot of worries about that. Everyone knew he was sick, but it wasn't a sure thing he was just going to go in and he was going to be as good as zweih on the AVP or as good as Simple, right? And then he goes in, and in a couple years, nico has made out of him. And the reason I'm mentioning nico so much is because for those of our audience that don't know, they are like son and father, right? They are like brothers. I feel like putting nico is a great role model. He's not an in-game leader. He's not a coach, but he is a fantastic role model for young players. And I think the fact that kyousuke's gameplay, because you did point out, you've watched some of the demos, kyousuke's gameplay and the way that he moves, his mechanics, they are really reminiscent of nico's mechanics from 2016, 2017 for me. So I feel like when I'm watching kyousuke play, I'm looking at nico being pretty much, I mean, I'm looking at a 10-year younger version of Nico, and the fact that he was able to make an Ulper transition into being one of the best in the world, for me, is an even bigger selling point for Rifle that shares some of the same spots that he used to play back in the day.
True, but like I say, essentially, here's the reason why, by the way, I actually think if you're Zonic, I love the gamble though.
Sure.
Because if this somehow works, mate, who the fuck ever had 3 aggressive riflers on a team before? That's not even a thing. That would essentially be like you've revolutionized how T-sides work in CS. So I also think since Sonic has had so much, like, I won't say abuse, but he's had so much extreme criticism. And I think crucially, the one thing actually people thought they'd never give him credit for is the idea he did anything with the team, because it looks like you just, like, if you, by the way, if you sign Nico policy, no one will give you credit for that, mate, because they were already complete players before they came. The difference is if this roster works with kyousuke, as in he's really good too, it almost does imply Zonic must have done something. He didn't really just sit down and go play the game, boys. He must have been involved with how we made, how do you make all these aggressive rifles function in the game? It's going to be tricky, I think, mate.
Yeah.
But the upside is so crazy. Who the fuck isn't? It's going to be box office, isn't it? Everyone's going to be watching.
Yeah, the tricky part is going to be Kickson will have to find a way to sacrifice even more out of his own game in order for this team to succeed. But as you pointed out, high risk, high reward. If that works out, I genuinely feel like this team could go toe-to-toe with Vitality and potentially even beat them. So I'm not sure. Are we putting them on perfect or pretty solid? I think it's somewhere in between.
The problem is, like I say, to me, is I would say perfect if we already knew that kyousuke was like definitely that good. So I would just maybe put the second tier for this one.
Okay. I think we can agree we're putting them on top of the second tier.
And the role angle as well. We don't know how that'll work out. Like, for example, maybe kyousuke is awesome, but then maybe it ruins Tess's game. Or like you said, maybe it ruins the Eco's game. That's the other part. Like the risk is it can work out awesome in a really good way. It can also go really badly too.
Yeah, it could definitely, but yeah, I think pretty solid is a good angle for this. Falcons definitely one of the teams that could compete with Vitality next year, as we pointed out towards the start of the show. Maybe one of the two teams that are actually looking competitive to Vitality, or potentially could be. Then we're moving over to Fnatic. This is one that I don't think we're spending more than 1 minute talking about, but they did lose makazze to G2, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later on. They were playing a little bit with ZeroFix, who used to be part of Passion UA, and now there's rumors of them signing Cypher as a replacement for makazze. Is there any hope left for Fnatic in this iteration?
Here's the problem. The reason why there probably isn't much is because the difference is Matty seemed like a much more talented and play with much greater potential than Cypher. I can see the thinking they're both aggressive riflers. But the problem here in this is if you tell me that, the immediate thing I think of, Ted, is just this. That's because Cypher used to be into the breach in the UK scene, and the guy Ross R, who does the like GMing over at Fnatic, comes from Endpoint. He comes from the UK scene, so I imagine he just knows that player quite intimately and knows he's a good player. Blah blah. That doesn't sound like that's your first choice there. No, the problem with this is it's almost certainly a negative for Fnatic. You've lost actually one of your better pieces. Like the sad thing about this is, this is where I really, again, I'd love to know what the thinking in Fnatic is. I wish we almost got like at least a PR reasons to why they do these moves, because as far as I can tell, you've lost this, like, one of your more important pieces for the future that you were building around, right when you just set the roster. Like, you just finally got the roster. So you had BlameF sitting there the whole time. Very good player. Overqualified to be in Fnatic, by the way. Matisse was supposed to be your up-and-coming, like, future talent. And, like, you know, next year could be HLT top 20. You've just signed the AWPer for Megabox. Jambo, you just got him in. So then you let one of the key pieces go. That feels like this has to be a negative for Fnatic. I think it's just a bad move.
Yeah.
I mean, look, you might have done good business. I could believe you got money for him.
The thing is,
it's bad for your future of your team, though.
The thing is, for me, if you're getting a lot of money for him, do you have a lot of options? And why don't you just try and go with the back, which you already did with Jambo in FURIA, and just go all the way and go for a bigger name? I guess you do believe in Cypher to some extent, but I'm not sure, as you pointed out. I'm not sure that the ceiling is as high as it was with Matties. I'm not sure that you can rely on him to be the big carrot.
I'll draw this contrast. This is actually one of the rare areas, by the way, where both Fnatic and NIP haven't fucked up Ted. Just like where NIP did a really good job actually locking Wrinkle down really early. I heard the same thing with Fnatic and Matties, mate. Like, I heard a whole bunch of teams, you know, did that thing where, like, they wake up a month after that move was done and go like, hey, maybe we should get, oh shit, he's already in Fnatic. And then you can't get him because they know he's the piece to build around. Because this is the person I was hearing from all the coaches that watched him. I was like, this guy will be a really good player one day.
Yeah, yeah. So at the least, they have made a little bit of money, we hope, out of Mattis's transfer. I think this is actually the first one that I would put in the middle category. I'd put them in a 5 out of 10. All right, but not too exciting, because I feel like, especially when G2 comes knocking with the big money for Mattis, you can't really keep him in there, right, against his will. So I guess you
Also,
sell
I'll
him.
just throw this out there. If I
Sure.
had to guess, I'll bet you actually got way more for this signing than you even initially thought you would, because this
Sure.
looks to me like this also, Ted. There's no universe where G2 Esports had a giant off-season board and this was the #1 name.
Right.
This looks to me like you've already had a pull of a bunch of names.
Okay.
You didn't get them and you've had to panic buy someone, and so you've gone for like fucking Mattis from Fnatic. There's
Yeah.
no way that was your #1 guy. So I also think in that scenario, by the way, if you're Fnatic, you could potentially have bled him for quite a bit on this one. You might have done some good business.
Let's not forget, NIP outbid G2 for Kaspersky, right? So that means that Fnatic, or well, I guess Mattis was at least #2 on the list, maybe even lower. But I guess it does make sense for him to be top 3 because he is a great player. But yeah, I'd say Fnatic in the middle. You feeling about this one?
Oh, that's fine.
Okay, we're gonna keep moving forward, and I know this is gonna be one that is really interesting to you in particular, because FaZe Clan did pull off. I'm not even sure how to call this move. They send broky on the bench. They get Simple to play Dallas in the major. And then karrigan goes out and says, even midway through the major, we were already telling broky that he's going to be back on the team and we need him. broky spent 3 months resting and going to the gym, and now he's back and playing better Counter-Strike than ever. First of all, I want to address something. I know gym helps, and I am someone that goes to the gym 6 times a week, right? I know it helps, like sports, trying to be as athletic as possible, being healthy, that improves your capabilities in the server. But when you go out and say someone's been going to the gym for 3 months, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a better Counter-Strike player from here on out. Doesn't mean that they're going to be able to deal with pressure, fix all the issues that they had before. It probably improves something. But why are we all advertising going to the gym as the ultimate formula for you to become the best version of yourself in the server?
I'll give you an answer. Even though you mean that rhetorically, here's the reason why. Because there's nothing else to say, Ted. He doesn't play CS. He's just
Sure.
sat on the bench doing nothing, and he wasn't good in the last resume, mate. He's just going, he's been at the gym, and he helped an old woman over the street with her shopping. She was going to trip over, and
Sure.
he did a charity run for 2K for kids with cancer. Like, bro, what about the game? We only give a fuck about. Here's the question, karrigan: can he shoot people with the AWP? If he can't, I don't give a flying fuck how much he can bench press. You know what I mean? And the other problem I have with this is, mate, put me like at the beginning of the first original, not the sequel. You know, the original Blade Runner, where it begins with that like special test where you're a replicant. Mate, let me have a test like that where I have like a truth drug I injected a karrigan. I'll break this motherfucker. You were talking to broky during the mid. Were you fucking bullshit? Bullshit. Unless you're doing some crazy like language lawyering where what you mean is as soon as you were eliminated from the major and you didn't have simple lockdown, you were like, hey, broky, you might be have to play again, mate.
Yeah.
I just don't believe it. I just don't. Look, I have no information, Ted. This is pure speculation.
Yeah.
But I do not believe that during the major, when you were going top 8 with Simple, and actually remember he played awesome in that last Swiss game against the Mongols, you must have looked at that bracket, by the way, like it was all, and thought, if we fuck around, we could be in the final here, bro. And if we go in the final, by the way, surely we're signing him. I'm sorry, I just don't buy it. I don't buy ever that in the back of your mind, as you're thinking that, you ever thought, what about if old broky came back? No one was thinking that. Everyone was in love with this move because he isn't broky, and he was already playing better than broky, by the way. By the way, that's already why I think everyone who's a FaZe Clan fan is depressed. Because you now know that Simple wasn't even in good shape when they brought him in. He even admits he stopped drinking and basically was like, mate, better start CS now. They've asked me to play checks notes to the major. Like, the idea of a player who basically just sort of like came back from the log cabin was already better than broky in every sense. That's really depressing. So that's why if you karrigan, you have to do the whole thing like, no, but you understand, broky was off in the northern winter area taking Wim Hof fucking cold plunges and Zen Namaste. He was at one with the, because we have to just sell every bullshit angle as to why it's going to be better. Because, mate, the biggest joke of all, I said it before on talk shows, is, you know, they did that joke. I don't know if Elise really meant he was joking or they're actually doing this, where they're not calling him broky, they're calling him like Helvy or Elvis or whatever his name is, right? As if, like, you know, it feels like it's a new player. My joke is even they don't want to play with broky me. No one does. Like, this move's just whack. Here's what's sad. Do you want to know the maddest part that no one will realize is? I don't even think it's not that broky can ever play good CS again. Look, he was a good player for many years. Maybe he can turn it around. The issue is, even if he somehow came back to broky of last year, it wouldn't make FaZe Clan good, unfortunately. Like, FaZe has, I actually think they have more problems than not having Simple, mate. I think the real reason the Simple move was a really cool one wasn't just the cultural impact that he's Simple. It was almost the promise that came with it, that if he really signs, he won't be a guy who just spent like 3 months drinking and fucking driving a Ferrari or whatever. The premise was, if he signs, surely he's going to grind like he does now, and then each month we're going to get a slightly better Simple, and then if you're really delusional like me, by the time it comes to the next major, he's like the 4th best player in the world. That's the dream, isn't it, if you're a FaZe Clan fan? And sadly, that dream is completely dead with the whole broky story.
You know what's the thing? There was one key thing, because Karrakin did give that interview where, and I completely agree with it. I'm not buying the fact that midway through the event you were calling broky and telling him we're going to be playing with you after this one, because as you pointed out, midway through the event would mean you, called him after you qualified for the playoffs, and you were like, yeah, this Simple guy just destroyed Mongols in the group stage. He's playing well. We're playing well. We're going into a quarterfinal that we should be winning on paper. I don't want to play in this team anymore. I want to get my old Oper back. It just doesn't make a lot of sense unless there was a lot of problems within the team or outside the server, which we didn't see with Simple, right? Behavior-wise. But which obviously is a possibility, knowing Simple. But in the end of the day, for me, in that same interview, Karrakin did say, bring in Sasha, and I'm going to quote him on this one. We thought that was going to fix a lot of atmosphere issues and psychological issues that we had on the team, but it didn't change anything. Well then, why do you think that bringing broky back will change anything? Or was that just you saying, well, maybe we blamed him for something that wasn't necessarily his fault, so we're bringing him back, and then we're going to try and change other things? I would have bought that if there was other changes going in. If they said, hey, you know what, maybe broky's poor performance was not really a result only of his incapability or his slump or whatever. Maybe it was other factors, so we're going to make more changes to try and change the entire picture. But then you keep the entire picture, you bring in the same guy, and you're hoping that after a 3-month break and going to the gym daily and doing yoga and meditation when you wake up in the morning, which is great, and I recommend it to everyone, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to become the best player in the world. He's going to be a better player, and the team is just going to be different. I just don't see it working out, and I'm not going to lie to you. I feel like this move for me is between those two categories, because I wouldn't say it's all right. I don't think it's all right. He's been playing better. But I think there is a slight chance it works, in the sense of, again, I'm not sure FaZe Clan with the same lineup and just broky that had a 3-month break is going to be 3 times the team that they were in the first 6 months.
Yeah, but the downside for me is all these other teams upgraded, though. So even if you were slightly better than the FaZe of the first season, you might end up in the exact same position. It'd just be like the 9th best team or something, which, I'm sorry, it is the issue when you get to teams, by the way, like FaZe, G2. The org aspect alone means these teams shouldn't be cool with just being at the bottom of the top 10. You're supposed to actually believe you can compete for the trophy, you know, whereas like some of these squads, FaZe especially, seems very far from that right now.
Okay. All right. So are we all right with slight chance it works?
Yeah, I would put it there.
Okay.
It's not, like I said, I could even see a world where broky plays all right. It's just the problem is the other problems in FaZe haven't got away.
Okay, we're leaving FaZe in here for now, and I think we're gonna leave them here permanently. So we're going over to FURIA. FURIA now. This is no massive news, obviously, because they did play the major with YEKINDAR and Molodoy, and obviously Molodoy was already a thing before the major, and YEKINDAR got signed permanently right after that. But we're still gonna give it a couple words. How do you think it's working out longer term? Because obviously at the start you could probably make the argument that this was gonna be a little bit of a honeymoon period with Fallen as the rifle and then Molodoy and YEKINDAR joining in. Now that they have been together for a couple months, do you feel like that was the right decision? Give YEKINDAR the permanent contract, keep him in here?
It's tough because on the one hand, FURIA was so bad when they had that last Brazilian roster, like genuinely like depressingly bad even. That was even with people like KSO still being really good. That you just looked at that roster and they were irrelevant. They really were a team that would go to a Cologne now and they would get knocked out in the bloody plains or they'd barely make it out. And you would just be like, is this really where they're at? So like, I do think this is a better move and YEKINDAR adding does seem to be part of it. It's just at the same time, I do think some of the jazz of this roster came when they made like him as the temporary stand-in or whatever.
Sure.
It was that first PGL run they had, etc. I think in English the saying is the flatter to deceive. Like they looked a little bit better there than they maybe were. For me, the problem with this team is they're another one of those teams that's right on the brink of making playoffs, but then going out first round each time. Like
Sure.
I still cannot believe they fucked up that Pain series at the major, man. I think that on paper, that was one of the freest series I've ever seen in a major quarterfinals, and you lost it, bro. You just got beaten straight up. So look, overall, I do think it's a good move. It's just not an insane move, you know. And again, assuming we can't sign Brazilian players, which is seemingly the premise of this roster, it's not a bad one. Like again, who are you going to get that will be willing to join some South American team that's like a weird international? Again, it's probably one of the better ones.
I'd say, for me, the reason I would argue this one should go into pretty solid, I have a couple reasons for that. I think number one, Yuri's been playing like an absolute beast since YEKINDAR and myltsi joined. I feel like he's living a second spring to his career, and he was their best player, by the way, I think by quite a margin at the major, and he's been incredibly solid. And I actually did forget for a couple months or maybe a year or something that FURIA actually did have two world-class turret players in Kacpersky and Yuri, and now the second one is Awaken, and that's why I found him really exciting again. Second reason, I still am not buying the YEKINDAR style because I do think he's a little bit too reckless at times, even though I'm a fan of that playstyle. And I think sometimes he could still lose you games, especially when you were talking Inferno. But he has been playing much better Counter-Strike in comparison to what we saw in Liquid in the last couple of months. And then in the same time, as you pointed out, FURIA was that bad before those roster changes that I think anything that makes them remotely exciting to watch should be considered a pretty solid move because it was a dire situation.
I'll even give you the angle I've never heard any analyst ever make. This is one of those ones where like I would have done it myself in a video or in a desk, but I just never had the opportunity. I even think the reason it looks weird is because you're seeing a player with like fucking Latvia flag and he's joining a Brazilian team. That in your brain doesn't make sense. Take the flags off for a second and consider that the only time FURIA was ever actually good ever was when they had art. Bro, if I had to pick someone as an art replacement, isn't YEKINDAR like the better version of art? You know what I mean? Like, it's in some ways they know how to play with a player like this. They played there the whole time with a guy who presses W, and he does do that. He certainly does do that.
Absolutely. It adds to the balance, right? Because I'm going to go back to what I said about Kacpersky and Yuri. When you have those guys that are, and I'm going to say that again because I love the phrasing of it, world-class turret players, you need someone to be a little bit crazy. You need someone to be the other extremity, because if you don't have that guy, then the team just becomes, quite frankly, boring, right? So I do agree with you. I feel like YEKINDAR is a great addition to this team, and also obviously he is the bridge between myltsi and everyone else, and he's making him more comfortable. And myltsi is learning a lot from talent.
Mate. There's another person who can do interviews. There's another name that people care about and want to see play in the game, etc.
Yeah. So if you're down, I would leave FURIA in pretty solid because I think it was a good move. Okay, so we're going G2. G2 is where a lot of things changed. A lot of things changed. Okay, so obviously they bring in some Pius. They bring in Saw from Heroic, that duo, and now they got Mattis. They remove Snacks and Taz, and Hunter transitions into the IGL role. How do we feel about this one?
What's funny is I actually think if you evaluate this like we're doing now, just off who was G2 right before this and who have they added, and which I think is a very good move actually.
Okay.
I think the real problem G2 has is this. It's a bit like what I said about FaZe Clan. Is in theory, if you're a fan of G2 or FaZe, you want every off-season roster move to put us with a chance to be number one. And I don't think that move has done this.
Yeah.
Because the real problem you have if you're G2 is you can never have Nico and m0NESY walk out the door and then think whoever comes in the door after them can ever be the same player. Like, if they are, it's going to be years down the line, mate. Like maybe Mattis can be like Nico, but in like 2 years or something. And then those are big shoes to fill. So the problem you really have in G2 is you don't have any massive superstar name. But if you go on the other end of the equation, mate, and just look at who you do have in all the roles, the flaw of this team, I think, looks very good, actually. A lot of it is obviously contingent on will Hunter be a good in-game leader. No one can know that. I'll always say this. I always think the first 6 months is going to be rough for anyone. I don't care who you are, man. I don't care how great, but I mean, it never actually happened that Magisk ever did make the full move. He just did it when Glaive was out in Astralis. But if he'd have ever made that move, a lot of us speculated he might, maybe in Vitality, he would become the IGL, or maybe in Falcons. I still think even he would have taken a hard 6 months to really adapt to the role. So a lot of it does ride on the Hunter one, but I put it this way, I like all these signings. I like all these, I like all the removals. I think these are the right removals. removals as well. It's not even that someone like Taz can't be a good coach. It's just, I don't know if it was for this team. You know what I mean? Maybe he needs to go to a team where the personnel fit his style of coaching currently. I don't know. But I like all the moves. I actually think it's a pretty good set of moves, actually.
You know what I found really fascinating? I think 5 or 6 years ago, people would give and realize that teams need 6 months would be like the trial period of teams to show if there is any potential. I think nowadays people just judge every single team and every single move after 1 or 2 months, which is, in my eyes, is completely crazy. Because I do agree with you. I feel like if you are giving Hunter the role of an IGL, and obviously it's going to be a little bit different when you are letting Nico and myltsi go, and you're not bringing in anyone of the same value or the same weight, if you want to say figuratively, as a player and skill-wise, you are going a different direction with this team. This is not a team that's going to win trophies in the second half of 2025, probably.
Oh.
They could be competitive. They could reach playoffs.
Like they could win like
but
a
it's
PGL
a long-term investment. Yeah,
goes.
exactly. They could win a PGL. They could win a Fisher LAN event or whatever, unless, I don't know, Falcons decide to go there or whatever. But in the same time, this is a team that you could easily look at and say, well, maybe with a couple tweaks, maybe they don't even need the tweaks. In 8 to 9 months, those guys could be a top 5 or a top 7 team quite easily if everything's going fine and Hunter works out as an in-game leader. So I do agree with you. I feel like this is a long-term project, and it's all going to be about whether... I think the players understand that quite well, and I think So is a smart enough coach to know that he needs a little bit of time to build something out of nothing, although he's not necessarily working with nothing, but he's proven to be a really good coach when given pieces that people don't really rate as highly, right? That's what he did on Heroic a couple times, what he did on ENCE as well. I think it's all about people realizing that this G2 team is like a time capsule. You just bury it, you wait, and then in 6 to 8 months you open it and you're like, well, this is amazing. This is actually fantastic. You just need to water the plant a little bit and wait for it to bear fruit. So I'd put them in pretty solid.
Yeah, by the way, for me, the key thing here is like you can't be number one, because if you G2 number one would have to be you signed some massive name that was a slam dunk play, which you haven't done. But I agree with you. The difference is this sets you up, and actually, same logic. Use this season now as your evaluation period for these players and these roles. And the difference is the first season of 2026 could be amazing. You could then be contended for it all if you do it right. And I agree with the Saw angle for the same reasons. And by the way, I don't even think I need to say that much on the Sunpius angle. I think he's just a really good AWPer. I think when he gets in the right system and he gets some time to play, I think you will see the fruits of that. That's just a good signing, mate. Yeah,
I don't think Sunpius is a top 3 AWPer or has the potential to be a top 3 AWPer in my book, but I think he has the potential to be a top 10 AWPer. And this is what this G2 team needs. A top 10 AWPer that could sometimes exceed. He could be one of the best, but he's not going to be the best all year long. I still am a big fan of this lineup, and I think pretty solid is good for them. So now we're going into GamerLegion. Not too many changes there, so we're not going to spend too much time talking about that as well. They removed Slen, in my opinion. A good move. I wasn't the biggest of fans of Slant, and then you're bringing in Kursy from the French scene, who obviously has quite a nice resume, because he did play with Shocks before on one of those French projects, Nakama, and then he did play with Naitu, and he played with Gravity, and we both we all know that they are doing quite well for themselves right now. Obviously, Gravity being on 3D Max and Naitu being on ENCE. So supposedly a talent. I've watched him play quite a lot when he was in Tier 2 on Gen 1. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think he's incredibly solid. I wouldn't say that he's got, let's say, if we had to compare him to someone else who's on the teams that we've already discussed, to a Rinko, I wouldn't say he's a pretty different AWPer in my opinion, but I think he is solid, and I think he's a little bit smarter even than some of the high risk, high reward AWPers. So I am a fan of this. I'm not sure if that's gonna make GamerLegion a much better team, because I already think they were quite solid last year when you overlook the fact that they didn't make the major because it was online for the qualifier. But yeah, I personally like it.
I mean, the thing with me with this move is, I don't think GamerLegion has ever been a team based around having the star AWPer. They had Core, they had Slen. These are all players that are like good, and at times they'll show glimpses of being better.
Sure.
But they clearly work like a team that the whole squad revolved around. That they've always been more, in my opinion, about like the rifle core. So I think this is not a bad move. You have to also remember, GamerLegion is not an org that I would assume has money for big buyouts. Again, you are relying on the idea that Ash is going to use this like eye test and do a little bit of money ball and find you the next people. Which, by the way, they've also been fantastic at that. Like people give Heroic that credit, like you just did earlier. Heroic has millions in the bank, bro. GamerLegion, I don't even fucking know. Like the joke is, if Ash wasn't there, would any of us even give a fuck about GamerLegion? Wouldn't they just be known as like the one note fucking blast Paris run team? So I think instead, actually, a lot of people look at GamerLegion and do what I do, which is, I don't know the Grix player that well, but I tell you what, if Ash is willing to sign off for him, I'll give him a go. I think he's earned that sort of status where he will. And also, I agree on the Slend one. It was the same with Andu as well. Those two players, when they
Yeah.
first came into GamerLegion, looked pretty good online. But then, for me, they never transitioned to the LAN play. They were never as good on LAN. And so that means the potential wasn't there or wasn't there in GamerLegion. So I actually like these moves overall. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I don't like going far and being too critical, borderline toxic with some of the players, but I will say I am not the biggest fan of people that play for themselves more than they play for the team. And I do share that opinion for some of the ex-GamerLegion guys that you just mentioned. But yeah, I don't think Kursy is that type of a player. I don't think he's a baiter type of an oper or a baiter type of a player in general. So yeah, I do like it. I feel like maybe all right, but not so exciting, just because it's not that massive blockbuster move, and they were already doing a good job. So I don't think it changes too much for GamerLegion. Might make them a little bit more solid, but yeah, we can move forward to
the whole ethos of GamerLegion is like more than the sum of their parts, isn't it? It's not about the names. It's more like they somehow get a way bigger performance than you expect. So I imagine it'll be the same thing again. I'm expecting them to be a solid team. By the way, for me, GamerLegion, I actually think is in the position they should be in, which is until they ever get millions to buy big players or buy the next prospect, they're supposed to be the gatekeeper of the playoffs for me. This is the team that if they beat you, you probably shouldn't be in the playoffs. If you can beat them, welcome to the playoffs of like a real tournament.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like they're that type of a team that you can put in a similar category with, let's say, a 3D Max, for example, in that sense.
Sure.
You beat them, you deserve to be considered one of the best. Okay, so we're moving forward to Heroic. There's a lot to be said here, I guess. Heroic did make a mass rebuild, and one change that not a lot of people, I guess, saw coming. Obviously, they did have to part ways with some players, and so who went over to G2. They did get Tobis and Grix as instant replacements for those two, and we're going to talk about that. I'm a big fan of both those signings. And then the one that made me scratch my head a little bit, actually, was the fact that you're bringing in Nilo, who, for a lot of people that might have forgotten, was signed at the start of the year. And then Tenier comes in because Nilo couldn't play for personal reasons for 1 month. But then Tenier just turns out to be one of the best players in the world out of nowhere. So you can't really bench him for Nilo anymore, and you need to make a way, or you need to make it work with Tenier on the lineup and just figure out how to deal with the Nilo situation. So he did spend 6 months on the bench, and then suddenly the player break comes in, and you're benching xFloud, who was, alongside Tenier, I'd say the most pleasant surprise on this Heroic team, and was incredibly solid, and you're bringing in Nilo in. So I suggest we started off from the minus xFloud plus Nilo conversation, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Tobis and Grix, because I'm looking at those transfers from two different perspectives, because with Sampaius and so you probably didn't have too much of a choice, and you were forced to look for replacements. Do you feel like it was the right thing to put xFloud on the bench and bring Nilo in?
Problem is, I do think that Nilo did look like a talent when I saw him play. But again, in that sense, the problem with the xFloud one is I'm really torn on that, because I do think he was a pretty solid player when you had him in Sangal. Like, he looked like he was actually a legit player. And then also, you could also add in as well, I would even speculate there's a world where somehow they inevitably will do the fucking musical chairs in Aurora. Maybe he does end up back in one of those teams again. Like, that's not even off the table. So I actually wonder, is this actually purely on the Heroic side? Did they think this player wasn't good enough at his role, or was his role like done better by other people in the team? Because I feel like it can't just be pure like ability. Like, this did seem like a player where a team like a Heroic should, or an ENCE should be gambling on a play, or a GamerLegion. That's the sort of range this player should be on. So I did find it weird. But with that said, if you've already got Nilo, like, just like NIP had that weird thing where they didn't have the full fucking roster and they had Jackson, it also is what was weird about this Heroic lineup. It's like, you clearly do want that player in. You did sign him clearly as like a player that you want to build around and be one of your main players, not just the fifth player. Like, I assume this is going to be like their star rifler for years to come if things go. So I understand why you had to move on that eventually. It's more the other moves I'm a bit more confused by. Like, I'm sorry. I think I would compare Saw leaving this team to Nico and Monacy leaving G2. It's like, I don't care who's coming in the door, mate. They're probably not as good. Like, you can tell me all day long, but the Thomas guys are like Mouse. I have to see it work, mate. I have to see something happen. The difference is Saw was like one of the most money in the bank coaches we've had in years. Like, I would struggle to find a roster he failed with at this point in time. Like, he looked fabulous for pretty much all of them. So it's the other ones that are more the question mark for me. I don't hate the Nilo for xFloud move.
Sure. I think Nilo for xFloud is more of an identity one for the entire team, because obviously they're two different players, right? Nilo's pretty versatile. He's been an entry, he's been a lurk, he's been everything in the last 4 years. He's actually, interestingly enough, one of the first players I've ever casted in English in 2021, I think. when he was on the Young Ninjas. So I know him quite well. He's incredibly skilled. So I guess it's just they want someone a little bit more versatile that, you know, could jiggle around and you have a little bit more freedom to work with himself and Tenier, who's a really versatile player too. In terms of the coach, I completely agree with you. I feel like, again, this speaks about Heroic deciding we're going to scratch everything. We can't keep this coach anymore. So we're going to go for someone that we know works well with youngsters. We're going to go with someone that we know could be, I guess, on the transition, in the transition between an academy coach and a tier 1 coach. He's got the potential, but we don't really know if he's good enough for that. But we are going to give him some Academy League graduates to work with in hopes that he does a better job. Because when you look at the lineup of Heroic right now, pretty much all of them have played Academy Counter-Strike, bar Youngster. And I mean, he is still quite young, excuse the pun, but all of them have played some form of Academy Counter-Strike before. So when you are giving Tobis that, I guess, that team, you're hoping that the players will grow alongside the coach in that sense. Which I don't hate, but I do agree with you. I feel like in the end of the day, and it's not Tobis's fault. It's not that he's not a good coach. It's not that he can't make it work. He probably could. We're going to have to wait and find out. It's just the fact that So, in my opinion, was one of the best coaches in the world. So you're never going to be able to part ways with him and upgrade or go for someone that is, you know, equally as good unless you're, I don't know, getting Zonic or getting Blade or... yeah, you get the idea. I think So is one of the best coaches in the world, so it's always going to be difficult to topple that. But AWP-wise, I think they did make a good move with Grix. To be fair, have you had the chance to watch him play a little bit?
Oh, I actually didn't realize I said Grix for the fucking one earlier, but I obviously meant the Kursy guy. No,
Yeah.
I also haven't seen this play much. With that said, my immediate obviously assumption from the outside is if he's also from Belarus as well, I
Yeah.
assume there must have been some like approval / co-sign from
Yeah.
Tenier on this one. This feels like just an obvious angle, right?
Yeah, so the thing is, I did have the opportunity to talk to Grix and do like a 1-hour interview like a month ago. What he told me was the fact that there was a lot of interest from, let's say, GamerLegion or FURIA towards him, and he turned both
Oh,
of
he
them
could have
down.
been the Molodoi position.
Yeah,
Right?
he could have been, but he turned all of them down because he really wanted to play with Tenier on Heroic. That was the main thing with him. So it was Griggs just pretty much saying, hey, you know what, I want to go there. And as someone that obviously has followed his career, what I can say about Griggs is the fact that I am really shocked by the way that he's become such a prospect, and I think he's a massive prospect. He's an incredibly skilled AWPer. He's one of those guys that you rarely see. I mean, often out of the CIS region, but in terms of World Counter-Strike, rarely see come through. The reason is crazy for me, the fact that he's already on Heroic, is the fact that he joined Aurora Youngblood, which is the Aurora Academy, 1 year ago. So when you're looking at Griggs, is the same parallel that you can draw with Kacpersky, who joined Young Ninjas 1 year ago. So quite quickly, those guys are just going through the tiers, right? You jump from an academy team to a main team that is playing, let's say, tier 2 Counter-Strike. He was playing on that Astrum lineup that was, you know, the ex-Aurora one that got dropped because of the Turkish guys with PATSY, with Kenzie, with Norway, and all of those people. He was still carrying through. He still had massive performances, even though the team was a little bit of a shit show. So I feel like as much as it makes sense for NAP to invest in Kacpersky, it makes sense for Heroic to go for Grix. And again, I feel like the presence of Tenier in that team is going to make life a lot easier for Grix. And he is that type of a guy that is not as arrogant, which could be a bad thing inside of the server because maybe he doesn't play with the same, I guess, bravado that Rinka would on NAP if we're still making that comparison. But I think he is quite humble in a way that he realizes 1 year ago he wasn't the best player in the world, and now somehow he finds himself on Heroic and he's actually shooting well. I actually think that's an interesting one. I think he's much better than what he thinks. I don't think he realizes how good he could be, which I'm not sure if it's going to be a bad thing or a good thing for him long term.
Okay.
But yeah, in terms of Heroic, with all of that being said, how are you feeling about this one? Pretty solid, all right, but not too exciting?
Well, here's the problem. This is why I have to ask you sort of a clarifying question,
Sure.
which is, I understand they probably had no choice in Saw and Sun Pius leaving, but that is a negative for the overall plus minus. Like, you probably have downgraded in that sense, or it's just, you know, you're gambling that you've made a side grade or an upgrade. So for me, it's probably more in the middle. Like, I think it's hard to overcome losing those pieces.
I agree. I like the moves that they've made, but I do agree that I don't think Heroic is going to be as good as they were in the first half of the season. And even if they reach that level or reach close to that level, I don't really think they can exceed that in the next 6 months. I think, again, this is a long-term project, so we can't be overcritical. I would put them maybe... I'd say Fnatic is at the bottom. I would put them next to GamerLegion, maybe somewhere, maybe GamerLegion right on top of that. But I think they are good moves. But as you said, it's really difficult to topple that. So now we're moving into NaVi. NaVi was one that a lot of people thought we were probably going to see more than one change in, and that was a weird one. The reason I want to ask you to give me your opinion on JL deciding to step down, or I guess this being a mutual decision, is because you have a little bit of a funny banter history with him on social media, and he was actually a guest on Feed the Trolls with you and Sam just a couple days ago. Excellent episode, by the way. If people haven't watched it, I recommend go and check it out. So how are you feeling about JL's decision to step down? And obviously, when it comes down to makazze, I guess I can give a little bit of insight considering he's from the tier 2 space. But yeah, do you feel like NaVi maybe should have made more changes? And are you buying that JO just needed a little bit of time off and maybe he could come back in the future?
This reminds me of Simple taking his break at the end of CSGO, because if you remember, the implication at the time was like, yeah, but it's because of similar things. You know, I'm burned out. You know, my love for the game's gone. What the problem with all that is, this is where pro players are actually quite bad at understanding themselves, in my opinion.
Right.
Those are all things that come as secondary conditions to you not being as good at the game anymore. Because if everyone remembers in 2023, look, because he's Simple, he still was like a top 10 player in the world, but he wasn't like the guy competing for #1 spot. He wasn't the guy who every time in the serve was the best player and all that.
Sure.
And you know what? I'll imagine if you were the guy who grinded for years and you were #1 and all that, then I'd imagine actually be not being as good and losing more games and having more frustrations does then also make you think secondarily about things like, actually, do I love the game anymore? Is this actually what I want to keep doing? I think that's what happened with GL. I think that's all absolute fucking bullshit. Like, no, you didn't just one day wake up and go, I've decided to bench. No, what happened is you were playing like shit for the last season. You played some really bad series, even when you were put in position to do what you did last year, which is be the big game player. You didn't do it most of the time. You were just kind of a bit average, if not underwhelming. Like, by the way, most people in NaVi were. I also think there's the other thing about the NaVi angle, mate. I actually think behind the scenes, those rumors were true. You know what the rumors were like? In theory, anyone could be removed from this. I think Blade even implied it in an interview. I think what happens there, mate, is in this scenario, if simultaneously JL has, to be fair, for the whole year messaged in interviews that, like, you know, my motivation dropped after winning the major, or, you know, I don't know where I'm at as a player. Then in that scenario, it's just convenient that, like, you're the player who mutually steps back. Also, here's another angle people miss with this one. Because we're bringing our academy player, there's actually less pressure in terms of if we want to say, okay, that didn't work out, go back to the academy. You can just do that, Ted. This isn't like the signing where, like, when Ultimate joined Liquid, like, you look like an idiot if you cut the player after 6 months then, mate, because you signed him as a full-time player. So I will say, the one thing I'll give JL is this. Because it's the academy player, they, in theory, could play the shenanigans that if you go away, get your head together, and then in 3 months, you're really good again from grinding, and then makazze doesn't work out, then you can bring him back. You can reverse the move. And the difference is, unlike broky to FaZe, that might then be a real move. Maybe he was actually burned out. I'm sorry, I don't believe broky was burned out. I think he was just shit at the game, mate. This is all just fucking smoke screen for the fact we have to hype ourselves he's good. So I actually think this is a good move overall. Like, I think in NaVi, in the same way as no one can really figure out, I think we never will. I think them being #1 last year will go down as one of the greatest miracles in the history of Counter-Strike. I'll tell you, I've watched CS a long time. Find me any team that was the team of the year that had, like, nowhere close to the best players. It's ridiculous. I don't think it's ever happened in CS. So in the same sense, when they fell off, I also thought the hardest thing was, how do you figure out who it is? Because it can't just be one player. Like, almost everyone looked like they took the hit and had some issues, and roles got fucked up. The map pool went to shit. So I think in the same way as, like, it wasn't just one person, I don't think one player fixes it either. So I don't hate this move. Like, I do think it's a bit of a cheap move. I will say that. It does look like you've gone, just get someone from the academy for now and hope he's good. Like, pretty sweet. Is this player going to be as good as GL was last year? No. Because GL was like a fucking top 10 player last year. Like,
the thing is,
he earned that status.
The thing is, they are different players. That's the way. Because this, again, that suggests that NaVi will have to change some things structurally, right? Because JO was the closer of the year last year, so he was the guy that you leave in a clutch. He's not the guy to run in first and create space. Makazze is a crazy motherfucker, and I say that with the utmost respect. Himself and Krabeni, who was the in-game leader and again a Kosovian player on NaVi Junior. They were the two aggressive elements on that team, because I've had the chance to talk to Coolio, the coach of NaVi Junior. He did say that they are insane, but they are incredibly difficult to control. And one of the things that he shared, I think, just a couple days ago in front of HLTV as well, and he mentioned to me in an interview as well, was the fact that they are at times really needy, and they will win you games. They will be incredible, but you have to give them the space that they require in order to operate. So we don't really know how makazze is going to do in NaVi when he comes in and suddenly he needs to follow the structure of Blade and Alexi. Maybe they just I don't know, they recalibrate themselves so they can make him comfortable, and maybe they make him the best in the world. But the fact that makazze is coming in means that you need to change a couple things. Someone is going to have to take a little bit of hit. Is it going to be Alexi? Is it going to be Jame? Is it going to be Bit taking even more hits? I don't really know, but the one thing I know is that makazze is not that type of a player that you I guess turn into a Flamus, what VP did to Flamus, right? You can't just bring him in and be like, you're going to be playing support roles, you're going to be an anchor, you're going to be this, you're going to be that. You got to give him the space, give him the freedom, and then hope he's going to be playing the same way that he was on NaVi Junior. Because if you give him everything that he requires, I do think that he can be an excellent player. I think mechanically he's absolutely insane. But in the same time, he does need that breathing room. So yeah, I like the change. But then again, by the way, just to go back to what you were saying about Jo, the reason, and I don't want to cross the line of psychology, because obviously I don't know what's going inside of his head, and we can't know what is going inside of a lot of the players' heads. The reason I can't compare this to when Simple stepped down and I can't buy it as much and I can't respect it as much is because Simple did that after being one of the best for 15 years. And I guess I could understand him being a little bit tired. With Jo, I just feel like you had your breakthrough year. It was miraculous. Then the next season comes through. You go through 6 months of just not playing that well. And then suddenly you're exhausted, which for me, I know it might sound a little bit ignorant, and I'm going into a bit of a gray zone here, but I just feel a little bit weird about it. And I am willing to agree with you. I feel like,
becomes, are you cut out to be a pro? And if that's too much,
exactly. Yeah.
Maybe you should just become a streamer or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. That's what's going through my mind as well. It's like you wanted to break into tier 1. You play tier 1 for 2-3 years, and then suddenly obviously the burnout comes in and people are different, and everyone gets affected differently by that lifestyle. But then I look at someone like Nico and I'm like, how didn't he get burned out for 15 years? How didn't he want to break? And he's still one of the best riflers in the world.
One of the most underrated thing about all the great players is notice how, if you actually judge fairly, we don't let you be a great player after 1 or 2 years. You have to have longevity, right?
Yeah.
And it works on both sides, Ted. So on the one hand, a guy sat at home thinks, well, yeah, you haven't won yet. No. Most people would be broken when they don't win after a few years, mate.
Yeah.
Then I'll flip to the other side. The most underrated thing about serial winners is that they don't get sated by winning. I know so many people, by the way, most people who are normal people at home, not like obsessed Kobe Bryant lunatics, they would be like JL if they actually did win the major. And by the way, he was also given the major MVP.
Yeah.
They would be like, cool, I've done it. It's like, that's what makes normal people not cut out to be the best players in the world, unfortunately. So, no, I'm with you. Like, I think it's really underrated that, like, people who have won majors, some of them, like, lunatics, just keep going, man. They want to win as many as they can. Some of them never win, and it doesn't matter. They'll still keep going for a million years to try and win. But those are a very rare breed of player. And if it's the case, if Jails is self-identified, he wasn't that guy, and he isn't after a few months, then probably, tier 1 CS isn't for you, mate. Or you need to be on a smaller team with lower expectations. You don't need the same scrutiny and eyes around you, etc. Because the same thing, by the way, this is where I actually think psychologically you can draw certain conclusions about people. So notice how last year, Ted, when he was on top of the world, he was the reigning major MVP. His team's in every final. They're winning. Every other trophy goes to them. Well, at that time, he was loving all the banter in media. When they then dropped off and they couldn't make a bloody final for Love Nor Money in this last season, suddenly all the interviews were like, oh, and criticism's very heavy. Yeah, it is. The problem is, mate, when you're losing, it's going to be worse, isn't it? So I think some people just have to learn the hard way that, like, the esports dream isn't for everyone.
I mean, it's like being an athlete as well, right? I think it correlates pretty closely, but this is an entirely different conversation. So NaVi, I'd say all right, but not too exciting. Are you buying that, or would you go?
I think so.
Okay.
Like, here's the thing: I don't hate the makazze move in isolation. Yeah. The problem is, like I said, I think it's another one where it doesn't fix the rest of the problems in the team. Like, even if he's good, that might not be the difference maker, you know.
Okay. We're gonna keep it moving, and thankfully there's a couple ones that we're gonna brush aside quite quickly. The reason I've put them on, I'm not gonna lie to you. The reason I've put some of those on is because I just want to chat my shit. I just want to call some people out. NRG. I'm just gonna go into what the hell are you thinking? Also, borderline no one cares. So for people that don't know, NRG removed OC and Hexed. M80 were incredibly happy with this because they just got Hexed straight away. He's been one of the more mechanically sound players NA has produced in the last couple years. And then they signed Carson and Exotic, who are respectively 25 and 24. They've been playing North American Counter-Strike for close to maybe 6-7 years. One of them even involved in some allegations for some cheeky business that we're not going into too much detail about. So yeah, for me, that was just energy shooting themselves in the foot, and I'm not expecting too much. You have any sort of opinion on them, or we can just keep moving forward?
No, I mean, I would just say it's another one of those moves where one of the biggest problems you have right now is if you signed a player because of his name in the past, when you then remove him, even if for all we know these players are actually better in the server today, well, we don't know these players and you've lost the big name. So it always feels like a negative. It's going to be the same with the wildcard move, I have no doubt.
Yeah, I think so. Well, with Wildcard, I have a bit more of an extreme opinion because I do love one of the players that they did remove, actually. So, yeah, now we're going to go OG. OG, for those of you that don't know, they still exist. They finally removed Fiku, by the way. He's been there for 4 years, but now he's on the bench. Buzz got removed as well. And even though they haven't officially announced Arrows, they've been playing with him lately, and the rumors are he's gonna be joining OG. But they did sign Adam B, who is the twin brother of Susp and came through from Metasport and was one of the better playing players of Metasport, even at the major when they didn't do that well. So yeah, personally for me, because now we're entering kind of the tier 2 territory, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Arrows for Fiku. I'd say for me the ideal circumstances would have been keep Buzz and then not get Arrows, but I do like the fact that you are giving Arrows a second opportunity. I feel like maybe the jump initially into NIP could have been a little bit too much. I don't really know. This is going to be the team to decide whether Arrows is actually good to play international Counter-Strike or not. If he doesn't do well on OG, then things are not meant to work out. Adam B, I really like the pickup. I feel like is the same that we could say for Sus, but they're both incredibly, and not only because they're twins, but they're both incredibly sharp, both incredibly mechanically gifted. Both players that could be the X factors and could be the carries. I think that makes OG a little bit more exciting for me, and I wasn't the biggest Fiku fan throughout the first 6 months of the year, so I don't feel like that's going to make OG a tier 1 team by any means, but I do feel like it makes them a little bit more exciting, and I do see this OG lineup making the major again, and I feel like with what they did in Austin, they did show that they have some potential. Nikudos is playing well. Krisen, in my opinion, is one of the best young in-game leaders there is, and I have no doubt this guy is going to be winning some big trophies in a couple years' time. So, yeah, at this point, I feel like Fiku, I'm a fan of removing it because he's been here for too long, and I like the addition of the Swede. And then with Arrows, I don't really know how to feel about it. So, I don't know if you have any extra thoughts on this one. For me, I'd say all right, but not too exciting, maybe towards the bottom of it.
Problem with this is, like, the joke is, if I was talking about other teams, I often say this is an OG move. It's like you just sign a player that, like, is all right.
Sure.
They're not bad. But you know, they're never signing, like, mega talents, they're never... The problem with their team is they just wallow in mediocrity. And again, even though I do suspect from the things I've heard over the years behind the scenes, they're not putting anywhere close to the money that like the OG name would inspire from Daughter, etc. But people don't realize they still aren't doing like super like skimping on money though. Like this is still a squad where you can make a solid salary. So the real problem I have is any move they do in OG, can I actually see you play at a LAN and win a game? Like I don't know what we're doing at this point. Like I don't give like a team like that. I don't give a fuck about them just playing a million online tournaments. Like, think about some of the small orgs that go to all the lands now, mate, are in the play-ins of the Colognes. If you're OG, you should at least be there. You know, you should at least be at the LAN, even if you come last place. So I don't hate the moves. Like, the problem with Fiku is he is actually like a decent talent, but he's been there a long time. Like, that was like 2 or 3 years ago that this guy was a rising prospect. So my problem is I just don't give a fuck about OG, basically.
Okay, so I guess
just somewhere in the middle for me.
Yeah, we can put them all right, but not too exciting. Because or you know what, we're gonna shake hands because you did say you don't really care about them, so this would put them in the last one. I'd put them in the middle, so we can put them in slight chance it works.
But this way, relative to their team, it's not a bad set of moves. It's just what has their team accomplished as a result of it? You know, like is anyone going to see him at a LAN and we're going to see him do anything? Probably not.
Okay, so we're putting them in here. I feel like there is a slight chance they do a little bit better, and they did reach stage 2 of the previous major, so that's why we're not gonna put them at the bottom. I like the moves. I'd say they are here. I'd say for them it actually makes more sense than it did for FaZe to get broky. So we keep it moving. Those are gonna be fairly quick. We've got PARIVISION, and the reason we've got PARIVISION in here is obviously because of Jame, and he's still on that team, and now he's back to being the IGL of this team. So for me, that makes it a little bit more exciting, and the reason it makes it a little bit more exciting as well is the fact that Overpass is back into the map pool, and I think Jame has always been a really good IGL on Overpass, and his teams exactly, yeah, his teams have always been phenomenal when it comes down to Overpass. PARIVISION signed zweih and AW. I'm pretty convinced that a lot of people wouldn't really know those names. zweih is one that I'm really excited about because he was, for a lot of people that don't really watch Tier 2 or Tier 3 Counter-Strike, a teammate of Tenir on Gun 5. And on multiple occasions, zweih was actually considered to be the better player and the true star of Gun 5 in 2024. So I do feel like this guy has great potential. AW is, again, 19 years of age. They're both 19. AW is coming in from Amka when he played on a couple other Russian teams before that. Again, a pretty sharp, pretty aim-heavy player. My only issue with this team is that they have Jame, who's a really passive opponent, and everyone else is aggressive riflers. They have Noda, and obviously they have Belchanok as well. So I do think PARIVISION could be one of those teams that could be a pleasant surprise in the second half of the year. That's the reason I've put them on here, because I feel like with Jame being back as the in-game leader and Overpass and Vito and zweih joining the team, there is a lot of firepower, and this is a team that could reach potentially for me the major and could make a couple nice runs into some events.
I mean, the other problem with their team as well is cause Jame just has to be the AWPer. But at this point in time, he clearly just never given it up. Like,
right, yeah.
Like, if I was their team, I would have just told him, do the Fallen move, become just the IGL-ing, bring out Frosted as the fucking AWPer. What are we doing here? Like, that just makes obvious sense for where we are in 2025. Like, Jame's not... Put it this way, mate. He wasn't as bad as what happened to Cadian, but I think both of them never survived that CSGO, CS2 transition.
Sure.
They were the ones that were like, I'm an IGL and an AWPer. Haha, lol, isn't this random? It's like, yeah, in CS2, that is random. That doesn't work.
Okay.
Like, I haven't seen anyone make that work. And there's no such thing as a passive AWPer in CS2. That's just a bad AWPer.
Okay.
That's just a bad AWPer, mate.
So I think we put them in slight chance it works.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's again, the additions are good. It's just again, the team itself has bigger problems than these players.
Okay, the next one's gonna make a lot of people scratch their heads, and that's the reason I'm just gonna go with it quite quickly. Iberian Soul is the team of Alex, who used to be on NAP and things didn't work out for him. The reason I've put them on this list is because I want to put them in slight chance it works, because they got Martinez back from 9Z. And I am still one of those fanatics that do believe that Martinez is a good Spanish AWPer. That is the guy that replaced... Yeah, that's the guy that replaced Pius on Movistar back in the day. So I think unless you've got a hot take or some kind of a strong opinion on those guys, we can just put them in slight chance it works. And
he's another player that is a victim of the fact that there are fuck all AWPers in the game right now. So again, if you're like, think about where's Iberian Soul going to get a big name AWPer? This doesn't exist. So yeah, that's probably about the best you could do. That seems like a decent pickup. Yeah.
Okay. We're going forward. Liquid. What do you think about the fact that they didn't make any changes?
I mean,
they did bring Flashy, who was the assistant of Blade, but in-game wise,
because as I said before, they already did their change. They already did it. They got Shu here, but they just like, here's the weird thing. To other people, it might seem a negative that they signed Shu here there. I actually think that's good. Didn't you essentially just get to use all that time period to just test it all out? You had a lot of failures, but you got out your system. If anything, now you can go into this season fresh. Andy's not coming in at the first events, Cologne. You've played a few lands. You've even played the major. So I think that was already a good signing, the Shu here signing. The problem with the coaching signing here is I'll draw a sports comparison. Right, there's a concept they do in American sports. For some reason in Europe, we haven't applied in football. You absolutely could do it, by the way. Which is, I'll give you the example. You know, in football, there's a concept that in American sports, it's called the coaching tree. It's the idea that if you were an all-time great coach, the people who are your assistant coaches, if they later become an all-time great coach too, that's called your coaching tree, and it's almost like you're the lineage of how that goes. So the example would be like back in the day, you had certain people. I'd actually struggle in certain sports to name who they would be, but basically people where like, you know, after him, this guy came along, etc. Well, in European football, the analogy would be, if people know Bobby Robson of Barcelona, actually under him at one point in time had Pep Guardiola as a player. He had Mourinho as like translator, and then he had fucking Enrique as like a guy who was also So like this guy's coaching tree would be unbelievable, man. They're all like fucking Champions League winners. The real question, you can see why I'm going here. The real question here becomes, is that what was going on at NaVi? Is it going to turn out that this guy, like I was assistant coach at NaVi? Well, the problem there is we give all the fucking credit in NaVi to Blade. We don't know who you are and what you were doing. For all we know, you were going, enough milk in that coffee there, Blade, and then he did all the genius moves. If, on the other hand, by the way, you actually were learning from him and you have some like talent for coaching yourself and you figured some things out, that could actually be a really shrewd signing. But I'll give you the obvious example that scares me, which is one of the worst examples of a coaching tree in the NFL is actually Bill Belichick of the Patriots.
Okay.
He's had so much success in his career.
Yeah.
He's won 6 Super Bowls just as a coach of the
Yeah.
Patriots. And so what's happened is over and over again, Ted, people have signed his assistant coach or his defensive or his offensive coordinators,
Yeah.
and they get head coaching jobs, and they get set up with a roster, and they've nearly all failed to a man.
Yeah.
And so sadly, in his case, it does seem like it was more like I said, they were going like, enough coffee, is that the right biscuits for that there, Bill? They
Sure.
weren't necessarily the genius within the squad. So my problem here is I don't know fuck all about this guy, mate.
Okay.
If it turns out to be a great move, I'll have to retroactively say a great move by Liquid. As of right now, like, again, if you tell me I was in Navi as a coach and I go, is your name Blade? And you say no, then I'm not as interested. I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what you could have been doing.
So what, you'd say all right, but not so exciting for you, or?
It's okay. No, you know what? I'm going to be harsh. I think it's a bad move. Here's why. If I have players of the name value they have, I think you need a big name coach, bro.
Sure.
Like, you know, do you want to know something? This will be controversial. Everyone will flame the fuck out of it. I actually, if I were them, I would rather they'd had gotten Taz or something like that, you know, mate. We've got enormous personalities. We've got people like fucking Twists in our squad.
Sure.
Like big. We've got people like Naf, by the way. We're not as easy to deal with as people think. He might be a chill guy, but tell you what, chill guys need to kick up the arse sometimes, mate. That's the difficulty there. So if I'm Liquid, again, we're team Liquid, bro. Like 6 years ago, we were on top of the world. We were #1. We were winning everything. We should be back there again. I actually think with this roster in Liquid, you should be competing for like top 5 in the world. This roster deserves that status. So the reason I'm not a huge fan of this move is who the fuck is this guy? Not that he can't be good, but he isn't yet. No one knows him. So I would have liked this to be a big blockbuster move for Liquid personally if you're doing a big coaching signing,
I see the logic. I don't hate the flashy pickup, but that's because I think the reputation of some of those analysts and assistant coaches is a lot bigger when it comes down to tier 2 Counter-Strike, right? And Flashy in the last couple of years has always been praised as a guy that is like a sponge to Blade. The thing is, as you pointed out, we can never know how much he's actually learned, right? And even if he is great analytically, even if on the in-game side of things he's tactically really sound, we don't know, as you pointed out, if he's got the character to manage all of those big players, right? So that is the only iffy thing. The reason I'm not a fan of this is because I really thought that Liquid needed more changes. I really thought that they needed
surely
to
they
change
should
the
have
player.
been in the hunt for a saw. Surely they should be one of the ones, you know, fucking headhunting, something like that. Like that's the sort of name I want coming in from a Liquid fan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say that with as well clarifying, I do like Flashy, but I feel like if you are keeping all of those guys and you need someone to steady the ship, which was already not looking like the best one ever, obviously you give a little bit more time to Shuey, sure, but I still think that maybe if you wanted not to make any changes in the lineup, which they ended up doing, you bring in someone more experienced. But I am a fan of Flashy. I think he is the right pick, but maybe not the right pick for this necessarily 5-man lineup. I do believe that Liquid will make more changes in the foreseeable future. But yeah, with that being said, I think we can both agree that they are in here. Slight chance it works. Happy with that?
Sure. I mean, by the way, I have no reason to diss him. I just don't know what he's going to do. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Then I think we keep Spirit for last. We go Wildcard. You know what? I will just say it straight up. I think Wildcard ruined themselves. I really do think that they ruined themselves. I have nothing bad towards either Friend or Peeping. Friend, I've watched a lot in European Counter-Strike, and he's a pretty decent oper, the Polish guy. Peeping, I don't know too much about coming out of North America. I know he's one of the most liked people in there in the tier 2, tier 3 space, and I know he's not that bad of an in-game leader, but I feel like for Wildcard, this is the what the hell are you doing, or what the hell were you thinking? Not because of the fact that Frank gets promoted from the academy, or because you get a young, well, not that young, but unexperienced NA in-game leader to give him a bit of an opportunity. I feel like Stanislaw was one of the people that built this team, and I feel like phzy is one of the most underrated opers there is right now in the world Counter-Strike. So for that reason, I feel like Wildcard did have a bit of a blunder, because I think they lost 2 of their key pieces that I don't see a world where they would be able to even be better than what they were in the first 6 months of 2025, which was already a little bit bad.
I do think in terms of Stanislaw, there's a little bit of the glaive factor where people who don't watch the game are just going to overreact because of the name and be like, it's Glaive Stanislaw. Yeah, but it doesn't mean they get to play for 30 years and always be the best.
Sure.
Like they can have times when they like. I didn't think Stanislaw played very well at this last major. I thought the team had a pretty whack major in general. The problem I have is this: I know fuck all about the people they're adding. Like this is one of the most underwhelming rosters I've ever seen. Like for real, I even do look at it and genuinely wonder if you add together all the stories, like the idea that even Sonic was saying he was thinking of leaving and they
Yeah.
called him back last minute and then you look who they're removing. This almost looks to me like back in the day when the person who has control over the IRC channel just kicks everyone and brings their friends into the team.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, this doesn't. I'm sorry, I just don't believe. Again, if I brought them to the fucking Carrigan interrogation scene, I don't believe these are actually like real football manager moves that like make my team better. This just looks like, for whatever reason, maybe you had a dispute, maybe there's some rift in the team. It looks like you've just woken up, had a mutiny, kicked out a bunch of the people who seemed like the bigger pieces in the team, and replaced them with checks notes. Who the fuck are these guys? Like,
Okay.
just nobody's.
All right. So we're putting those guys in the last one. And then we're left with Spirit, and I'm give you the mic fully on this one. Are we putting Spirit in the 10 out of 10? Are they the only team that made the perfect decision in this break? Can we put them in the 10 out of 10? And if yes, why so? And if not, why so?
I'm a bit torn because I feel like of all the moves, they might be the one that is the 10 out of 10.
Okay.
But it also, they might be on the border for the one below. Because I put it this way, I do think this is a good move. The
Sure.
only downside here is, like I say, I would actually prefer you actually had just done a straight, like, roll for roll, bring in more experience. Like, the Perfecto move was right there for me. It's like,
Okay.
Everything about it seemed like it screamed, just do this move instead of Magics, and it fixes everything. So the angle here for me is this. I think it's a lot more of a gamble for zweih because who knows how he's actually going to play it in Spirit. Like, miss me with the, like, yeah, but in Amiga, they had zero pressure. Like, the joke is most people would pick them to go 0-3 every fucking round of the major. Like, nobody watches them play, mate. They're another one of those teams that is just lost in the mix of tier 2 online play where if you watch the cops, you know them, but if you don't know they exist because they don't make the lands very often. But he did seem like one of the best pieces on their team for certain. Yep. And I also do think it was, even though people will always want to remove Zontix because he has zero fucking aura, and for someone with a big name, he certainly has some bad games. I do think it was the right move to remove Magics. In my opinion, the problem you have in Spirit is a bit similar to the problem they have in FaZe, which is it's not that either Chopper or Magics can't play in the team, but I don't think both can play in the team and be number one. Okay. So in FaZe, my problem is this. You can't have Carrigan and Rain and then be the number one team in CS.
Sure.
Like, I think you are just begging belief. And by the way, you don't have a donk in FaZe. So if you're in Spirit, you have to consider that the team has to be doing a move that gets donk, who is already insane, into more trophies and more finals and more semis and deeper in the mid. So I think this move does that. I think actually, like, the gamble's good. I think it's the right gamble. I think you've upgraded firepower. I don't care that you've lost some of the intangibles of Magics. I don't think that was the thing holding you back from winning games, mate. So at this point in time, I mean, it was just actually released today, if people saw, by that B-Trams guy. Yeah. If you look based on all the metrics, donk is literally the only player in World Counter-Strike where his team loses every single time he gets less than a 1.0 rating on HLTV. Like, they lose 100% of them. And I'll even draw people's attention to a game they played last year where it was that one that was like fucking, where donk versus Wildcard of Stanislaw had to drop like plus 50 to barely win a BO3. Like, mate, nobody has more on his shoulders. So anything that brings firepower to this team, I think sight unseen, mate, even without knowing how the roles will work out, sight unseen, I'm really hyped about that. And that gives me so much more excitement to watch donk and to watch Spirit play. So I do, look, I don't know if we could put it top category because he's an unproven player, but I tell you what, I think it's a great move. I actually think this is the most slept on move of the Rostermania because people already reacted to kyousuke 1. Yeah. People already maybe, expect bigger things from NaVi or FaZe or whatever. But the difference is, just like the Falcons one, there is a chance they can make you number one. I don't think that's implausible, mate. Or it can at least put you like number 2 or something. So I think this is a massive move for Spirit. I love it.
I agree. I think 10 out of 10 is the one that we give this one. The reason I am a big fan of this one as well, first of all, obviously zweih is a crazy good player, and as you said, you have that factor of unproven on tier 1 stage, and obviously now he's gonna feel like there is some expectations of him because he's on Spirit and he's expected to be competitive with Vitality. And I think it's a really valuable thing that you're saying about him being on Amiga, because no one really cared whether they would do well or not, right? When you don't have any expectations, that changes a lot for you as a player. But in the same time, I feel like with the history, the track record of Spirit, Chopper and Hallie have been incredibly good at taking those young guys and making them play the same that they were playing in Academy Counter-Strike and be even a little bit better and not really seem to be fazed by the pressure too much, right? When you look at the past, I mean, if you want to look at the Spirit name in general.
Also worth pointing out, if we are to believe what they say in interviews with the drama and the rumors, Like, you can't even do the thing that we could have done of, like, why didn't you take kyousuke? If supposedly he
Yeah.
chose Falcons, so if that's true, you didn't have a choice and you were already going to another, and there wasn't another kyousuke, so I don't. If that's true, I'm also at peace with this move.
Yeah, I think it makes sense because Zontix is a versatile guy. You can make him run him first because obviously this is a one angle that people forget about is the fact that Magix would run in first a lot of the time to get refragged by donk, right? But now you've got Chopper who can potentially do that sometimes. Zontix maybe you can reshape a little bit. zweih is a fantastic lurk player. In the modern state of Counter-Strike, you need your lurk player to be able to be a star, right? You need him to be like ropz, pretty much. I feel like zweih, it could be drawn like a parallel, and this is probably a wild thing to say. I think zweih, play style wise, is a little bit similar to ropz in some senses. So it will be interesting for me to see if it works out, but I am completely down with you on this one. I feel like this is the perfect move. And I think looking at the final list, I'm quite happy with it. You fine with this one?
I think it's pretty good, yeah.
Okay, so now we're gonna do one type of a quick fire 5-minute minigame because this is already going a little bit longer than what I thought. But we have the tier list here. Now, me and you are both going to look at the bench players and everyone that's not on an active lineup. And you've got 2 picks of bench players that you want to see active. And I've got 2 bench players that I want to see active and think they're worth being picked up. So we're going to do this in a bit of a quick fire. You tell me who's your first one. Give me around, let's say, a 30-second explanation on why that is. And then we're going forward. Okay? So who's the first guy that is benched or inactive right now and is not on a lineup and you want to see playing and you think he deserves to be playing?
Right, much as in the past with people like the aforementioned fucking Perfecto, or you could even go with people like JKS. There are people who are in this like benched position that I essentially never shut the fuck up about. Every time I get a chance to remind you, this person's out there. So I've done that with this too. If when you know the 2 people, you're going to immediately go that's entirely on brand. So the first person I'm going to go with, I'll just go with the big name. It's obviously simple, isn't it? Like it doesn't even have to be FaZe Clan. By the way, it could be any team. I just want to see this guy play again. And by the way, everyone who thought I was delusional for that, because let's be real, 99% of the people who tell you how bad Simple was in Falcons, I just don't believe they watched the games, mate. Those were online bullshit games, or they were like the worst games at RMR. Like those aren't the games people. I don't believe they watched. If you ever watched him in Falcons, even in Falcons, 1 out of every 2 games he was good, mate. I'm telling you, he was the best player on their team. I'm not even trolling. And then I actually thought in FaZe, the only game he played actual shit in was the quarterfinal. By the way, against a team that literally went to the final too. So it wasn't like they were a bomb team or something. Like that was like the 4th or 5th best team in the world. So, and if you watched when he played the same team in the Swiss, mate, when he actually woke up in that like last game, he worked them.
Yeah.
It was like some real old school Simple shit. So the reason why I need to see Simple play again, it doesn't have to be for NaVi, it doesn't have to be for FaZe. The joke is you can even pick some of the mid-tier list teams I picked. It's because I do believe if he actually has a real contract, he will practice and play like he's doing now, and he will just grind again. And look, it's not even about can he be like the best player in the world. That's like an unrealistic expectation. If this guy was even top 20, the whole game changes again. It becomes so much more interesting a scene. And also, mate, we do lack these aggressive, powerful AWPers. So you add another one into the game and it changes a lot of matchups.
Okay. I really like that. And it actually aligns really nicely with your second choice, who is, again, a pretty aggressive AWPer and a pretty entertaining one. So, yeah, I guess there isn't a lot to add about Simple because they do share a lot of your opinions on this one. But why have you chosen degster for the second one?
I mean, the saddest thing about degster is he essentially had the fucking knock in an IP story, right? Where it's like, well, I've sort of proven myself. I've got some potential. You like me in the team, don't you? But yeah, you fired me. What the fuck? That's really unfair. Why have I been fired? You've been replaced by Device or myltsi. Oh, understandable. Have a nice day. Like, you can't argue with that, mate. Like, if you're degster, even though you just won that tournament, you actually have to turn around and go, you know what? If I'm being real, I'd replace me with myltsi. Yeah, it's way better than I am. It's myltsi, isn't he? But the problem is, if we're not talking about myltsi, mate, degster could walk in about half the top 10, I feel like. Basically, unless you have a myltsi, a zewu, a super good AWPer, this guy can do it, man. And if anything, hasn't he just shown that he just worked his way back up? He only, if people don't know, he only had about a year. He had basically from just before the player break last year through to just before the player break this year when he was benched. So I think if you watch, every 2 months, it looked like he got a little bit better. And by the very end at that last tournament, he actually was not just having good numbers. He was actually in the server. He was making big plays. He was winning clutches, or he was making like cool fucking sequences. So I think he was right there. And sadly, it's only because of the fact that, like, one, he's Russian, And then 2, he's in this weird, like, you get benched and people forget about you. I'm amazed he's not on a team already. I actually really did think, by the way, that this would be a player where maybe G2 get him when m0NESY goes. You know, these are the sorts of, by the way, maybe Heroic picks him up again. Like, these are the sorts of teams I expected this guy would walk into. So I'm kind of shocked that he's just sit on the bench still, because I feel like there's so many teams out there where, again, if you don't have a superstar AWPer, I think this guy's probably better than your AWPer.
The most precious thing about degster, I think, as a player is the fact that, as you pointed out, he's an incredible hard worker. I still remember a couple years ago, before he went into Team Spirit, he was one of those guys that would go into the DM and he would play like 1,500 kills every single day, right? He would just grind the hell out of the game. And I think the biggest issue with him, maybe before joining Falcons and towards the end having a little bit of success, is the fact that all this time that he spent on OG and trying to play international Counter-Strike and not working out for him, I feel like it just harmed his confidence big time. When you're looking at some of the Counter-Strike he was playing early days on Falcons, he was a little bit scared at times. Towards the end, PGL Bucharest, that was degster in his full capacity, right? That was degster just running around, clutching up, playing like he believes that he can't lose a fight. This is where degster, I completely agree with you, is a top 10 opener in my opinion, and is a cracked player. I just think the issue with him is that he's gone through a lot of hardship in his career, and he needs a little bit of time to get adjusted and actually relax a little bit when he's on the team and believe in himself again. I feel like he's one of the most dangerous players on the server when he believes in himself, and he can pull off some crazy plays for real. So yeah, I agree on that one. I think degster is one that, interestingly enough, I thought Liquid would be going for him over Ultimate, by the way.
That's another cool move, yeah.
I thought that was a really obvious one for Liquid, and I was pretty shocked when they didn't do it. But yeah, degster is a great shout. Simple is a good shout. My 2 shouts, I'm gonna take it down a notch a little bit, and I've decided to go with the tier 2 El Clasico. Well, tier 2, I say. Flamas did play tier 1 Counter-Strike in the first half of the year. Now, I'm not gonna talk too much about his individual performance, because obviously, as a lot of people can see on the screen right now, he didn't have statistically the best here, right? If you're just looking at the numbers, you'd say he had a horrible one, right? You'd say that that's an awful season. The reason I want to see Flamas get picked up by a team is because I still feel like this guy that impressed everyone and made a lot of people fall in love with him on GamerLegion is still in there somewhere. And I feel like Virtus.pro just wasn't the right place for him to make his debut. I would draw the parallel a little bit with MPO actually on NaVi a couple years ago, right? Where I think maybe it was a little bit too early for MPO. I don't think it was too early for Flamas to play tier 1 Counter-Strike. I just don't think it was the right project. I feel like the fact that you're being brought into the team, you're being jiggled around, you're being made change positions, change roles all the times, and then in the same time, you are being brought in to be the star, but you get replaced by a support player, pretty much what we talked about earlier on in the show, I think is pretty self-explanatory into why Flamas was not really given the chance to thrive as much.
I mean, this is an example of what I think you will see happen again and again in Counter-Strike, which is all these other teams will lose to or play a scrim against GamerLegion and go, wow, this player is so good, we should sign him, and not realize it's not only the player, it's like they have clearly in their team got a good setup with how they bring people in, how they conceive of their role, and how they develop them as players. So the part of the issue you have is, as far as I can tell, VP is the anti-GamerLegion. You bring in massive names, and they all go to shit. Like, so I think, sadly, I agree with you. I put that more on VP's shoulders than I do on Flamas's, mate. Like, in fact, the real sad thing I feel for him, because he's got this massive contract, is part of me wishes we could just wave the fucking Harry Potter wand and he'd just be back in GamerLegion. He'd be fucking cooking in that team.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. And I think the big issue there for people that don't know, just to bring in a little bit more detail before I go into the second one, as you said, he's got a really long contract with Virtus.pro, and obviously you could make the argument, and I think you did make that on social media, maybe the money he's getting while he's benched is good, right? Maybe it's worth his while.
We just don't know is the problem.
Yeah, we don't really know. But even if it is good, he's a 20-year-old guy that just broke through into tier 1 Counter-Strike, played 1 season and got benched, so there is a strong possibility that this makes a massive hit onto his career in general long term, right? So right now, if you're a Flamas, you're just hoping that someone goes in and pays the buyout and lets you play into the second half of the year or maybe next season, and you're hoping you don't stay on the bench for too long, because that would really harm a young player. Going into the next one, in case you don't have anything else to add about Flamas.
No, it's all good.
I
do think that's why the long contract thing is what's scary, because I think there's so many. By the way, I think of so many teams out there. That's one of the most required players in the game. Someone who actually wants to be an aggressive rifler on the T side. Like, surely everyone in the top 10 wants someone like that. So it's just baffling to me. Just sat in, and who knows how. By the way, it feels like he could go months without getting a team.
Yeah. The thing is, I feel like maybe, let's say you're looking at G2. they could have opted for him instead of Mattis. I would have liked the move, but then you're probably comparing the prices, and he's probably a lot more expensive than a Mattis would be, which makes things ultimately a lot more difficult. But my second choice for someone that I want to see on the team, and someone that I feel like deserves better, because obviously now he's getting tryouts with 9 and he could play tier 2 online Counter-Strike throughout the next season, is actually phzy from Wildcard, and that is the reason that I wanted to give Wildcard all that slander. I really do believe that phzy, even if you want to be a stats worm, and I don't usually like looking at the ratings and using them to evaluate on a player's performance, especially when they do play in North America quite a while. Wildcard, for everyone that's been following the team, had an atrocious year. They were nowhere close to what they were able to put forward in 2024. phzy was still incredibly solid, and I feel like he's one of those guys that just because he doesn't do the craziest highlights and he's not the most aggressive oper in the world and he's just good at doing his job, doesn't get a lot of credit. I feel like phzy is one of the smartest opers that are not, let's say, top 7 opers in the world or top 5 opers in the world right now. I was literally thinking about this, and I know I'm mentioning Liquid quite a lot. I feel like I would have liked Liquid giving phzy a chance more than I would have liked Liquid keeping ultimate, even though I know he's got the high ceiling, because I do feel like it's really underrated nowadays, the fact that you don't really get opers that are really versatile anymore. You either get a really aggressive guy or a really passive guy. phzy is a guy that is really good at being the, I guess, the amalgamation between the two. And you can, I literally feel like you can put phzy on every single team. Well, maybe not every single team, but a lot of different teams in terms of the style of Counter-Strike they play, and he would really quickly find his way onto the team. And I, again, feel like he's good enough with the rifle, good enough with the pistol, crazy with the op. He's smart. He doesn't make a lot of unnecessary moves, knows how to position himself to get favorable fights. I just feel like he's an incredibly solid oper that I will honestly regret watching struggle in tier 2 Counter-Strike if it comes to that, because I feel like he does deserve a little bit better.
I mean, one of the problems he has is if you're on an NA team, the perception is like they had the easier route into majors in the past because of a number of slots. So the problem is you don't go to the lands every single month. So it's hard for people to really know how good you are as a player. Like being the best player on Wildcard isn't as hype as it sounds, because Wildcard was somewhat irrelevant beyond that one major, like about 8 months ago at this point in time. So I do think he might have been the best player on that team. But I mean, the problem is the other issue if you're phzy as well is, much like the NPLs of the world, you're also a bit burned because you're already a known name. Like people want all the next talents to be unknown names that are coming fresh out of tier 2 and they've never played any lands. Even though, by the way, that could be a negative, like you don't have any LAN experience. So no, I think he's right in the middle. I think here's the thing. It's more like you have to be someone where you want a mixture of, like, you already know a skill level, but you also want a little bit of the experience.
Okay, I think this is a good moment for us to put an end to that conversation. Thank you very much for joining me. It's been a pretty long and eventful one. Hope everyone enjoyed. Thank you again. And yeah, everyone make sure you go and check out Feed the Trolls and Snake and Banter, anything else that Duncan does, because he's putting out content every single day, it feels like. But yeah, that was about it. Let us know what you think about those roster moves in the comments, and which one were your favorite ones, which one were the ones that you didn't like. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Stay safe. See you soon.